Wow.
Yeah. A little disconcerting, but anyway, we made it.
I'm
They had
glad you
enough gas
made
to
it.
get back. They said, well, we don't have enough fuel to circle and wait for the weather to clear. So we're just going to fly back to Portland.
What did I miss?
Oh, Kristen
Good
had
story.
a
Adventures in aviation.
Oh no.
flight to Ashland, go back to Portland, then drive
Flight
to
to
Ashland.
Medford. We were literally on final approach, about 50 feet above the runway. And then apparently it was too foggy, too cloudy. They couldn't see. So then they punched the gas and we flew back up, and
Yeah.
the weather didn't clear. So they decided to fly us back to Portland.
Oh, wow.
So, and then we drove. So we left Portland about 9 o'clock last night and drove 4.5 hours to get here. So, but we made it.
Yeah, I'm a
So-
white knuckled flyer, so that's not
Well, my
going
wife was right across the aisle, and I think I still have some nail marks in my arm.
Yeah.
Glad you're all right.
It was really odd because, you know, you're on your final approach, you're getting ready to land, and all of a sudden they punch the gas and you're like, whoa, we're going back up for whatever reason. It was really interesting.
Glad you're okay. We'll go ahead if everybody is here, and we'll call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal informal session for, believe it or not, December 2nd, 2021. Happy to have everybody here. And Commissioner Kula, would you lead us in the pledge?
Happily. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance.
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
And
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, and thanks again to Carolina and Ken for making sure we're able to do our online meeting. So we'll begin with our calendar session. Is there anything to add to our joint calendar that we haven't noticed?
The one item that I would mention is we got the email from Marion County about the appointment, and it looks like it's proposed for December 10th. And just wanted to confirm, and if that works, we can add that to the calendar, and I can respond to Chad and give him the green light to proceed.
Yes.
Yes, that works for me.
Thank you, works. Appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm
Yeah,
also glad it's not the 29th.
Yes,
Me too.
yes, agreed. Cutting
Um,
it close. Yes,
the Yamhill Fire Protection District dinner, volunteer dinner is tonight. I don't know if anyone else is attending that at 6 o'clock. And then this weekend, there's several events several of us might be at. Yamhill Fire Breakfast with Santa at 7. And there's a prayer walk in Newburgh starting at 2. So several of us might be there. And then the Willamina Christmas Parade is Saturday night. So I just want to make sure that's on everyone's
And then I've got
radar.
5:30 in Amity, which I don't know if I heard. Maybe I heard that you cut out for me at that.
Amity's Light Parade, right? Is
At 5:30 on Friday.
Friday. Okay.
That's a lot of Christmas time.
Yeah.
and also I believe Commissioner Bershauer's Shop with a Cop in Newburgh is Saturday, the 11th.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
And there are 2 CPRD meetings. One, I believe, if I have this right, on Wednesday, the 8th, and Thursday, the 9th. And I just want to make sure if any commissioners are joining by Zoom, we don't have any conflicts. So just maybe to put those, so it would be CPRD on the 8th and CPRD on the 9th, if that's in fact correct. That's what I was told.
And then I'm going to the Arches Inn, Mid-Willamette Community Action Agency is doing their grand opening there, and I'll be at that. And that's in Salem, but I wanted to make sure that I kept abreast of what other communities are doing for housing.
Thank you. Okay, thanks, everybody. All right, if there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and move on to public comment. We did receive some public comments. Thank you, Carolina. And those are related to a work session that we're doing coming up in the next week or so. And so those have been received. And thank you, everybody who took the time to weigh in. And we'll go on to our first work session, which is item E1, which is the review and discussion of the radio system review. And Carolina sent some information regarding the communications assessment report. So I think we've all got that in our packet. And there is our Sheriff Svensson. Nice to have you with us. If you want to bring us up to speed on this first work session.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Christian, I was listening to your little escapade, and I had a similar thing happen, but I was 10 minutes from landing in Reno and they turned around and flew back to Portland. So yes, never fun. My drive down there was 8 hours though. So I decided not to get back on the plane.
Yeah, no, we didn't either. And ours was not, our drive wasn't as long, but yeah, disconcerting for sure.
So yeah, so I appreciate you guys taking the time. I know this is a busy time of year, but I thought this would be an important time moving into the next budget cycle to have a conversation kind of about the radio system. You know that for the last few years, we've been looking at doing an entire system-wide review of kind of a point in time, I guess you could say, of what's the system looking like now, what do we need to do with the system moving forward, and what are all of our options. I know that we have pretty much yearly, I get pressures or questions about whether or not we should be joining with some of the bigger entities up in the northern part of the state. And so I decided, well, I know just enough about the system to get myself in trouble, but I'm not the expert. And so we contracted with a company called Comms Northwest, Scott Riley and Chad Lund. They should be joining us actually today. I'm not sure if they're on here yet or not, but they have put together a presentation to kind of give you a review of what that system-wide review looked like. And they have a couple options that they've presented to me. They're not necessarily going to specifically say one option's better than the other, but what I've asked them to do is to give us a good idea of what all of those options look like and what the price tag might look like for each of them, because they're significantly different in prices. And and I've obviously got my own beliefs of what I think we should be doing moving forward, but I figured this would be a good time to let them have that conversation. If you guys have specific questions, you can ask them. And then as we move forward with budgeting, we can have a good conversation of what it looks like and what it is that we're needing to try to accomplish. So without further ado, I think Comms Northwest is on here and we'll turn it over to them.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. And we appreciate you being with us this morning, Communications Northwest.
Thank you, Commissioner Sterritt. Can you guys hear me okay this morning?
Yes, can you tell us who you are?
Yes, this is Scott with Communications Northwest, and I'm here with Chad. And
Welcome.
we appreciate the opportunity to present to you guys the report that was commissioned by the Sheriff's Office regarding the public safety communications conditions in Yamhill County. I'm going to kick this off and then I'll turn it over to the author of the report. This was a very intensive report that took a lot of information in, and we've condensed it down to 29 slides today to conserve some time. I believe you guys are in receipt of a 198-page report from yesterday that is certainly more inclusive of all the information that we've gathered. Just a little bit of background on Communications Northwest. We were founded in 1984. We have over 35 years in the wireless communications realm. We are located in Oregon City, Oregon, and we have two locations in Washington State. Our real focus is on first responders in the public safety community. Some of our customers include Deschutes County, Whatcom County, Washington, Oregon State University, and many others throughout the state of Oregon. At this time, I'll turn the narration of this over to Chad, who is the author of the report. And I'll chime in as necessary. Thank you very much. Chad.
Good morning. My name is Chad Lund. I have been in the wireless industry exclusively for over 25 years. And it was a pleasure to be able to meet a lot of different people in the county and be able to prepare this report. So diving right in, the current radio system. The current system, the county began pursuing the current system in 2005. Construction began late 2009, and it was actually turned over to the county and accepted in early 2010. The system has undergone not a great deal of revisions over that time. It has undergone some minor revisions of the sites where some of the equipment's located, and some shifting around to try and enhance coverage over the years. But the fact remains the oldest components of the system were manufacturer end of life and no longer supported in 2013. And even the newest components of the system were end of life and obsoleted in June of 2017. The current system, it is a UHF system. It supports the sheriff and all of the law enforcement and fire agencies that are a member of 911 in the county. It is a fairly basic system that includes 11 sites and 5 channels that support the different agencies and disciplines. There are other auxiliary components to the primary system. There are some standalone voice channels that are used in case of emergencies and larger incidents for fire, ground, and tactical communications. But really the basis of the system is that it is an 11 site system currently that serves 5 channels. Newburgh Dundee, their 911 has access to all of the county system, the 5 channels. And there are the current sites that are part of the primary system at this time. Also worth noting, of these sites that the county inhabits and has availability to, currently 2 of them are offline. The site at Sheridan Fire and the site at Mountaintop West are currently not tied into the system. And here's just a quick mapping overview of where the different sites are. It does have a good geographic coverage of the county, ranging from the north to south and east to west. That the number of sites really is not an issue at this time. The findings in the user feedback, went out and approached close to all of the agencies, both fire and law enforcement, for in-person meetings, as well as each agency filled out a survey going over the current number of radios they had and concerns and ideas and suggestions for the future. So that was collected from all the agencies. And of the data collected, it showed that there are, we got back 333 of the portable radios that go on a person's belt, the handheld radios. The vehicular mobile radios, there were 225. And there are also 215 of the fire paging devices that the fire agencies use for paging out their members. So issues we recognized, as well as some direct feedback from the different users, but there were some overall themes that kind of ran through. First one is there has been an overall decline in the quality of communications over the past. Many commented that it seemed like it had been over the past several years, but really accelerated in the past couple of years. A lot of feedback on the quality of the audio, varying from day to day, and sometimes even in the same day regard throughout the time of the day from between the morning and evening. And kind of to reiterate one of the past notes, the core system equipment is all more than 4 years past the manufacturer support for having parts availability and service availability from the manufacturer. Repair and replacement parts are currently for the system only available on secondary markets. And in a lot of cases, they're used. That currently, if there's a failure, there is almost an exclusive reliance on going to various online sites and trying to find parts across the US that somebody has in order to acquire those and get the system back online. It was also noted that the current fire paging system does not provide predictable service and tends to be intermittent in the grade of service that it provides. Just some basic notes on the various sites. The Sheridan Fire site is offline and was removed from service due to microwave stability issues. That equipment, because of the challenge of finding parts to keep the system active, there was a quantity of those parts that were utilized at other sites for repair parts. There are multiple different stages of the equipment to create the system, from the actual radio transmitters through to the antennas, and there's a lot of equipment in between. But there is a substantial part of that equipment that is analog, old telecom style, and has been obsolete for quite some time. The Mountaintop West site was partially decommissioned. A lot of that equipment was moved to a different site. There still is some remaining equipment there, but that site is offline as well. The equipment shelters, there's one specifically that needs an extensive amount of repair. But one of the other big issues that was brought up is that, especially from the law enforcement side, is that there are a number of areas throughout the county where radio communication is not available due to the current configuration of the system, as well as the age and its ability to perform. And the officers have learned that there's areas where the system, they can't get voice communication, so they do rely on their cell phones as well as their computer data terminals that are in each vehicle. Poor coverage was widely noted, and the fact that it tends to fluctuate. A major area of discussion has been the ability to communicate with outside agencies. The challenges with interoperability, and especially in large scale events, for everybody to have communication between each other. And that kind of leads into the same thing with joint operations. They have been a challenge. Many agencies state that they have multiple radios that they carry on their person as well as in their vehicles in order to be able to communicate with all the different agencies and maintain the communication they need. That at times they have 2 and sometimes 3 or more radios in order to have all the communication needs met. Another issue is the getting a structured maintenance program that with the agencies and the current way that radios are managed, many of them do not get any kind of annual or routine maintenance. And that really is an important part of having a properly working system that communicates reliably and predictably. Another concern is that currently the core system is only supported by a single technician who has working knowledge of the system, and having 24/7, 365-day a year technical support available is an item of concern to some of the agencies. And here are quotes that were a sampling of quotes that were collected directly from users in the fire and law enforcement community, and just kind of a general overview of what some of the feedback is directly in their own words regarding the current system. Before moving on, there are two phrases that come up consistently. One is P25, and just a quick synopsis. P25 was created by the APCO committee, Public Safety Federal Committee, that wanted to ensure that agencies of every discipline, if they got to a large scale event, that there was the ability for those agencies to intercommunicate. And a lot of that was driven by 9/11 and lessons learned over time from large scale events, and to ensure that if an agency acquired a radio and radio system, that they would be able to talk to other systems and other radio users in order to be able to communicate properly, and that there wasn't a different protocol utilized in the radio system by every different agency. Simulcast operation is the other term that is very common, and you'll see coming up. Simulcast operation just simply means in a larger scale system with multiple sites, it really is as simple as the exact same audio on the exact same channel being broadcast out from a large number of towers, that instead of a single channel originating from one location, if an officer speaks on their law enforcement channel, it is simultaneously broadcasting from all of the sites that are on the system. And that is how you get the broad area coverage, is with simulcast technology. So there were options identified for the future of the system, or potential options for the future of the system. One was to establish a partnership with ODOT and to potentially merge onto the state of Oregon radio network. Meetings were had with their management and the state of Oregon ODOT group. At this point, for their various reasons, decided to pursue a potential partnership with Yamhill County. They are certainly willing to be a partner in different aspects and potentially in other ways in the future, but in this instance, they declined to be a part of it. The other option is a potential merge with the WCN or WACA radio network, and merging onto the network with them and expanding the WACA system to also include Yamhill County. Yamhill County does currently operate an independent system owned by the county, and another option is to implement a replacement system that is identical to the current system, but with new core hardware so that it is current, new, and supported by a manufacturer, and the ability to be properly maintained and serviced. Another option is that the county can look at implementing a P25 system, which is the law enforcement standard at this time. WACA's radio system is P25. And so that has become very much a standard in the industry. And Yamhill County could move to a P25 system, similar to what other agencies have already implemented across the country. The other item as a footnote is the fire paging system is a standalone system at this point. And that fire paging system is equally end of life. And its stability is definitely not first responder grade. And so it definitely is time to make some changes on the fire paging system. And that is also, there's an option to implement a replacement system to bring the fire paging system into current technology. So
the key elements of the partnership with WACA include WACA system is a 700 megahertz P25 phase 2 digital system with digital voice clarity that allow for unrestricted use of that radio network. It would increase the coverage outside of the county with the expanded footprint, as WCN is partners with C800, which is Clackamas County's radio system. Agencies would have access to their own talk groups, and talk groups are probably better known in layman's terms as channels, if you will. One of the issues that we found that's in your report is that a lot of the agencies wish there were more channels. This would allow for many more talk groups or many more channels for your user groups. Would allow for interoperability with other agencies currently using the WACA system and others that we'll see that are networked in, as well as WACA's offering provides maintenance and systems management.
WACA would assume control of the existing hilltop sites that are currently operated by the county, and it would replace the current county-owned equipment. One item of note with the WACA system is Motorola is the sole vendor and equipment supplier for that system, and the only equipment that they allow onto that system. So Motorola does become the exclusive vendor at that point in a partnership with WACA. WACA does retain sole ownership of the system equipment. It would require the county turning over any asset value of the radio system to WACA. Any future upgrades to the WACA system would also involve cost sharing. It's hard to predict when those upgrades would come and what quantity and what dollar volume, but there is an awareness that upgrades are a natural course of the system and the county would share in those costs. The county would also be responsible for all of the equipment costs and the associated labor. The WACA would, in essence, take over 7 of the current county radio sites, remove the Yamhill County equipment, and install the Motorola equipment and the infrastructure and the backbone, and that cost would fall to the county as well. WACA does also charge an annual user fee for each subscriber unit, whether it be portable or mobile. And currently that cost is $465 per radio annually for the fee for a subscriber unit to be on the system, but that does include annual maintenance. WACA provided some slides for this presentation to kind of outline their proposal of what it would look like. Scott, are there any key elements there that you would think should be highlighted?
The WACA system is very diverse. Also note that both Washington County and Clackamas County passed multi-million-dollar bonds to implement this system. And so as you see the offering there from Washington County, we won't go over every detail there. There's a lot of information there. There's a lot of users supported, and it covers a lot of area. The biggest thing, in any of our information that we've really looked at is the necessity to cover the constituents and users in Yamhill County. But as you see by the information on the slide, it is a very diverse system. The members include, for purposes of interoperability, interconnection, Salem Kaiser, parts of Polk County, portions of Yamhill County, North Marion County, Clackamas, Multnomah, Washington, portions of Columbia County, and Clark County, as well as there's interoperability with the state of Oregon. As you'll see a little bit later on, the system that, the alternate system that we're proposing offers a lot of the same options. Again, one of the points with the members was technical support, and WACA has a full complement of folks to support the systems, both on the dispatch side and also on the radio side. This is currently the network diagram. Not super important, but it was a slide that they provided to kind of give you an idea. Again, I believe you were sent a slide deck yesterday for further review.
And the sites in the red are the current Yamhill County sites that WACA would be taking over and expanding their system into those sites to create the coverage needed for Yamhill County. And so they did some coverage modeling, and based on their coverage modeling, this is the coverage that they have provided, that they believe the system would provide if implemented at the sites that they noted. The blue shading, or the shading, is the areas of coverage where a mobile radio in a car should be able to operate properly. And here's the same thing, just with the portable radio that the users wear on their belts. This would be the respective coverage for those units. So Motorola and WCN worked together to put this cost, this ROM estimate together for Yamhill County. And note the fact that Yamhill would be getting all of the feature sets available to them that their system has built in. It is a 700 and 800 megahertz radio system infrastructure. It would be tying in at YCOM and providing all of the tie-ins, the support, and their budget estimate does include 300 radios, just as their baseline number. At the 300 radios and the installation of the system, they have a budgetary ROM of, they came up with 11.2 million. But between discounting that Motorola has available and system discounts, they're able to offer the Yamhill County a reduced pricing of 8.2 million.
We would note that offering here is a rough order of magnitude. We believe that the price would be north of 8.2 million once the finite details of the requirements are presented back or under contract. Also, the annual user subscriber fees and annual service, not including any kind of upgrades, would come with a $260,000 per year service agreement. Again, that does not include upgrades to the radios and or to the system pursuant to the information that WCN provided to us.
And as a footnote, the annual user fee does include annual maintenance of units, but it does not include any repairs or repair parts costs for the individual subscriber units, the mobile and portable radio units that are used by the agencies. Those repairs would still be billed out at a normal rate as needed. The other item to note is that the current $465 user fee is a current estimate. They did note that that annual user fee is subject to change based on labor rates and PERS, and there were some other things in there that they said do guide their annual user fees. And so those are subject to change annually based on all of the different factors. As we noted, one of the options is for the county to continue ownership and operation of its own system, and to replace the current system with an identical system, just of new equipment that's serviceable and optimized. And some of the key elements is it does, from a technology standpoint, bring the system up to a current condition, and the technology behind the equipment is current. There's the ability, there's a far greater pool of technicians to draw from that recognize and are familiar with the equipment, as well as you do have the ability to provide some upgrades, and it does produce a migration path because current equipment is all software upgradable and programmable. If the current system is just swapped out for a new current system, it would leave the county with a software upgradable system that could be migrated in the future and improved upon. But it in the first stage would not produce any coverage or any real benefits other than stability and getting an acceptable grade of service. So it definitely is the least expensive option. The infrastructure cost to produce this, and these are budgetary estimates, and there would need to be a microwave link to bring the site at Sheridan Fire back online. But the same mobile and portable subscriber radios that are currently in use across the county could continue to be used if desired. So it does create a budgetary estimate of $1,583,900 for this option, with an estimated annual system maintenance cost, and that is estimated, but of roughly $120,000, which is similar to a current level. Also to note is current supply chains are in the news a lot. Supply chains are an issue, and any technology is susceptible to those delays at this time. So the amount of time to implement a new system is extended currently compared to what it would normally be. But it should be roughly 200 days is a good estimation for amount of time to implement this system if it was the selected route.
The key benefits of implementing a P25 phase 2 system in UHF would be to reutilize a lot of the frequencies that Yamhill County currently has. It would allow Yamhill County to continue to operate autonomously from other systems and continue to have independent ownership. This is an IP-based system that would work with your current microwave hardware and your 911 dispatching. It should be noted that within the last 24 months, new consoles were purchased in dispatch, and in this case, they would not be replaced. We would just continue on with the current consoles that are in dispatch. This would require restoring the microwave connection to Sheridan Fire. This system is fully software upgradable to accommodate future enhancements, like the integration of FirstNet. Allows for over-the-air programming, digital communications. It is a 7-site, 5-channel system that allows for trunked operation. And again, when we talked about channels, this would allow for unlimited channels for your constituents and the user groups that are on the radio system. Over what you have today, or just replacing with a analog simulcast system, this would significantly increase your current system capacity. It allows for GPS location systems and services, supports additional data applications. And a big one that came up in the user conversations was it prevents unauthorized users on the system, as those users and radios have to be registered on the system. It also future-proofs the system and allows for expansion over many years to come. The P25 certification allows for multi-vendor support. The subscriber units that could be on the system could be any of the 6 major manufacturers who manufacture P25 radios. So would allow the user groups to choose what fit best for them versus a one-size-fits-all in the WCN model. The other thing that allows for is remote system monitoring. The newer technologies allow us to be able to typically know about issues before they become big issues or catastrophic.
P25 system, because of the fact it is part of the standardized digital protocol, it does allow the ability to connect directly with other P25 systems. So entities like ODOT that have statewide systems, and there are many other P25 systems out there across the state. It does allow the ability to have direct interconnection with those systems for multi-agency operations and to be able to respond to large-scale events. And it was not discussed in depth, but there is the possibility, because the WCN system is a P25 system, it would also allow the ability to, if an agreement was formed, be able to directly connect to the WCN system, the WACA system, and have interoperability at a user level via different interfaces that could be implemented. So the infrastructure equipment for a full P25 option across the county, it does move to $2,182,260. Again, we would need that new microwave link to get Sheridan Fire back online, and only P25 capable mobile and portable subscriber radios are capable of working on a P25 system. So the current subscriber units in the county would have to be upgraded to P25. And based on the data that we were able to get from the different agencies on the radio counts, it equates to $2,575,251 And again, this is a budgetary estimate. So that combined comes out to roughly 4.9 million. And that quantity is based on, it was 568 radios that we were able to identify across the county, and that subscriber radio pricing is based on that count. The system does, a P25 system does have some additional layers of technology, which does increase the maintenance costs. But an important note is that as far as outages and mitigating risk of system outages, the system is available or is able to accommodate remote monitoring, remote servicing, and almost every function can be addressed remotely if needed. So if an issue does come about, there's immediate alarms and notifications, and a technician is able to respond to that before users in the field are ever even aware that there was a pending issue. So similar to, this is kind of the direct correlation to the coverage mapping that WACA provided. If the county were to maintain ownership of its own system, it would rely on 7 of the sites that the county currently operates. And this is the predicted mobile radio coverage of what that system would provide. And likewise, here is the portable radio on a user on their belt. This is the predicted portable radio coverage.
As you can see in the coverages from the slide deck, the WACA coverage within Yamhill County, or WCN coverage within Yamhill County is very similar. They're within about 1% of each other. And I think ours is a little bit stronger, or the offering from Tate is a little bit stronger than the coverage in Yamhill County by WCN.
Touch briefly on the fire paging system that mentioned previously is not providing a level of service that it should for the fire agency community. Is obsolete, and really there's no major enhancements or upgrades that are relevant here. It really is getting the existing obsolete equipment brought up to a current level so that there's the ability to maintain a predictable level of maintenance and repair and serviceability. And so that is the budgetary estimate to replace that system and get it updated and current. FirstNet's a common topic that comes up, and there's a lot of history with it, but just a quick synopsis is the federal government wanted to ensure that first responder agencies and entities had the ability, had access to cellular service that was dedicated to serving those needs and had priority access in case of a large-scale event. That law enforcement and fire agencies would have priority access to the system and ensure that their communication needs were met before the general public. And that partnership was created with AT&T Wireless. And it is in development. It's been in process for a long time. It has made some tremendous advancements over the years. but it is not still developed at this point. It is still in process and has several years to go before it gets to a point where it's possible to rely on it in greater amounts. And really with FirstNet, I think a main takeaway, and there's a quote there from an excerpt from the Department of Homeland Security that just notes that it does not support mission critical voice capability at this time and should not substitute for the local traditional land mobile radio service in the mission critical voice. And so they advise that the first responder community should continue to rely on their traditional LMR radio communication, but with an eye for the future. And that's where software upgradable systems really come into play, so that as these technologies evolve and develop and mature, that they can be implemented rather than having to, again, buy a whole nother system and move to another technology. And with a software upgradable system, as these technologies advance and evolve, they can be implemented very easily. And one of the big things that is coming in the future is the ability for the portable and mobile radios that the users use to have LTE ability within the radio. And if you travel outside of your radio coverage area, if there's cellular coverage, your radio will just continue on an LTE network without the user ever knowing that they've lost radio coverage and are now communicating over the cellular network. That it would be seamless, and that really presents a huge benefit in the future for the different users to be able to not have to pick either a cellular or a traditional radio option, but the merging of the two, which is coming.
In summary, if the county should choose to continue to operate its own communication system, it's essential to replace the current obsolete system with a new 7-site system option. Should the county choose to abandon ownership and partner with WCN or LACA, which currently is the only viable partner, formal meetings would need to be arranged to negotiate terms and other agreements as necessary. Otherwise, we recommend the county implement a strategic governance for use of radio communications by all agencies in the county, outline user expectations, define cost sharing, define services that are available, and ensure regular maintenance of all communication devices is completed annually. It should be noted that we've done many system deployments, and in those many system deployments, we typically go in and evaluate the maintenance of the portable and mobile radios that are out there. Our experience is a failure rate of somewhere between 75 and 80% of those radios that are currently being carried on by our public safety officers that are out there. We've also seen in the last 3 years that agencies have taken big steps to make corrections and continue to service them. But many times system issues are blamed on subscribers and vice versa. And the important thing is that not only does the system have to be maintained, but so do the subscriber units or the portable and mobile radios that these officers, firefighters, and other officials carry with them. So that concludes our presentation. I would turn it back over to Sheriff Svensson to open up the floor, or however the commissioners would like to proceed.
Thank you very much. Sheriff?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I appreciate all the work that they've put into this. I've got the actual final report, which is like 160 some pages, that I can find a way to share with you if you'd like to see all. It goes into more details about our existing system, what the sites look like, some of the repairs that we should be making moving forward. And then it outlines a little bit more in detail what those system improvements might look like. But if you guys have any specific questions for Comms Northwest, this would probably be a good time to ask them.
Thank you. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Kula.
Thank you, Chair. I guess my first question for them, and first, thank you, Comms Northwest. Great presentation. I actually understood everything you were saying, so good for you. So my question, the one that came up first was, there was the comment about ongoing squelch issues and pagers, the fire pagers. Would the pager upgrade eliminate those squelching so that people don't turn their pagers off at night?
Commissioner Kula, there's a multi-tiered answer to your question. The first thing is that the system is throwing off spurious activity that we've been able to record on a pretty consistent basis. Some of the pagers that we had come in contact with while we were doing interviews in agencies are 12, 13 years old. They've got batteries that are very low and that haven't been replaced in 10 years. And in my best analogy to put this in the layman's terms is, most of us replace our cell phones every 2 years. There's a reason for that. So when it comes to critical communications, replacing batteries every 2 years is really the best practice, but also servicing those particular radios. The reason we don't service cell phones is because it's not a financially viable option for us. But when it comes to radios and pagers, they should be tuned, aligned, and calibrated annually to ensure for the safety of the user and for the public. So it's a little bit of a long answer for you.
No, that's helpful. Thank you very much. I appreciate the complexity.
Thank you. I have a question, and thank you very much for the details here. A question about, in the past, perhaps Sheriff, you could weigh in. Do I remember correctly, but was there a concern about any kind of collaboration with WACA in the past and why we haven't done it prior to this? And then also how that relates to the pros and cons of an independent operating and maintaining an independent system, Yamhill County, and then basically, or collaboration with WACA.
Yeah, no, I can start with, I think the historical behind our system primarily starts back when we went out for the radio levy. We went out for a tax levy to build out our existing system. I don't believe at that time that there was the ability to merge with WACA. The number of tower sites that it would have taken at the time, given their technology, would have cost us millions as opposed to what we were doing at the time. So we went with our own system. Moving forward, the conversation is now starting to open back up primarily because of their P25 digital platform that they're running off of. But much like TVFNR, they have a pretty robust financial support behind it. And the Washington County radio levy was in upwards around 60 some plus $1 million that they put together for this. The Clackamas County radio levy to increase was plus like around 50 some million. And so those large funding streams, plus with all the users that they have, it offers the opportunity to merge with them. However, as you'll see through there, it's you'd be paying a pretty high Cadillac price of maintenance and user fees, and you're subject to one brand, which is Motorola. And if Motorola increases their prices, anytime a portable or a mobile goes down, we're still paying $500 a year to maintain it, but then I have to go out and buy one. And those run anywhere between $15,000 to $20,000 a piece. And so there's a lot of benefit, I think, for those metro areas that have that financial backing. I think just from looking through the report, it makes it really hard for us, because if you imagine the part of this conversation is the subscriber units. The sheriff's office is one user out of multiple users that are on the system. And so asking a Dayton Fire or an Amity Rural Fire District to have to now start paying on their own $500 per unit to maintain their portables and mobiles, and then at the same time have to foot a large dollar amount to replace those is going to require some conversations across the board if that's something that we choose to do. So I think the long answer is that we went our own direction because we had to. Now the question is what can we provide to the citizens of Yamhill County technology wise? And I think we have the ability to upgrade our system to a good technology base that provides some good support for our users and our citizens, with the capabilities of connecting with our partners if need be. And I just don't know if investing the full amount of money and handing the system over to WACA is necessarily in the best interest of our community.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions?
Well, Commissioner Bershauer probably has something to say, but I just wanted to note that Sheriff, you answered my next question, which is really the one about the cost to the local jurisdictions.
Chair, thank you. And Sheriff, just for clarification, in the WACA proposal where it said 8.2 million, is that the portion that that they levied? Is that the equivalent of what they levied, or is that something else?
No, that would be, and I can, if Comms Northwest wants to jump back on specifics, but I believe what that comes down to is they would be taking our tower sites, the cost to remove all the equipment and to install their equipment at the site, the building of new tower sites that they may possibly have to build, and to do all that technical work goes into that $8.2 million. So it's truly a cost of what they anticipate it would cost them to take over our equipment, modify it to put their equipment in there, to buy all that equipment. And so in essence, what we're doing is we're paying them to take our tower sites and strip of our equipment and put their equipment in it, and then add us into the system. And then on top of that, pay a user subscription fee for the remainder of the system. And then at the end of the day, all of the towers that are sitting in Yamhill County, all that equipment, everything belongs to them, and we don't control any of it anymore. And we're just writing them a check every year.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good information. So then, Ken?
I'm sorry, Sheriff, I'm going to put you on the spot because I don't know, and maybe the commissioners are going to have a question, but I am wondering, because with the proposal with WACA was such a high dollar amount for the upgrades and the system replacements, where do we realize the cost savings with if we upgraded with the P25, why does that come in so much lower if we're going to be replacing all the same equipment and doing similar work that's going to require all this system-wide upgrades, and just seeing that it's coming into half the amount versus going with WACA?
It's the difference between Motorola proprietary equipment and the ability to use Tate, Kenwood, and other equipment throughout the system. So your literal, and I refer to it as the Cadillac. Motorola is the Cadillac. It's the most expensive equipment. So what you're paying for is a proprietary subscription fee into Motorola, with that you will never be able to use anything other than Motorola products unless WACA approves another piece. So currently right now we have a Tate backbone, we have Kenwood portables, we have Kenwood mobiles, we have multiple different vendors that can operate off that digital P25 that offer a cheaper version of the radios that are still good quality, versus a Motorola, which is the top of the iceberg, the most expensive product, and that's the only product that you can purchase. So that's a significant difference in the pricing, and that would be the reason why we're able to do it on a cheaper route. And it's not because the system is going to be cheaper. It's not going to be that it's a lesser quality system. It's still a P25 digital system. It's just a difference between buying a Lamborghini versus a Lexus. You're buying the name, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the difference between a Lamborghini and a Lexus, but I understand what he's saying.
Commissioners, any other questions? So as far as this process right now, this is informational. And as far as the decision for this, will there be a recommendation, Sheriff, from your office?
Yeah, so what we're going to do is based off this report, I've got a scheduled meeting with the fire user group in a couple weeks to also go over this and also have further conversations. It's an interesting dynamic as they added at the very end of their presentation the concept of a governance. We don't really have an agreement across the county, even from when the radio system was under YCOM. There really wasn't an agreement on, what is the acceptable equipment that you can purchase to put on the system. We had a lot of volunteer agencies that would go out and buy these little portables for their volunteers that you could buy on Amazon, and they would not work appropriately with our system. It would cause issues with our system, but were things you could purchase and just program into our radio system. So at minimum, we're going to have the conversation of a little bit of a governance conversation of these are the accepted equipment that you put on the system. You're going to maintain it on an appropriate level, and you're going to ensure that it's maintained and everything's working properly. And then at the same time, it's going to be a joint conversation because for the radio system infrastructure upgrade to a P25 or even just replacing our system is one price tag. And then if you go to the P25 compliant digital option, then 2.5 million of it is new radios and new mobiles in the vehicles. And that's not just for our office, that's for Sheridan Fire, West Valley, Carlton, Yamhill, Lafayette, all the users at the table. So there will be a conversation where we will have to discuss as users across the board, what does the new purchase of that equipment look like versus just implementing and upgrading our radio system. And so if we do a P25 digital system upgrade, and we think that's the best route, we're going to have those conversations with the users because they will not be able to communicate on our system if they don't have that new technology.
Thank you. Ken, did you have anything else to add?
No, I think the sheriff was, included that in some of the overview, because I think one of the bigger discussions and questions that, of course, is going to be any upgrades. We have a portion of the budget, Fund 10-163 for the radio system. And we don't have sufficient funds for, so there's going to have to be some further discussions on how to fund the needed upgrades, depending on whichever path is eventually decided on to go down. We currently do not have the funds just in the budget to execute one of these upgrades or one of these options at this point. So that's going to require some further discussions, and then also through the budget process, keeping in mind the timing and kind of expectations for implementing any type of upgrades. Right now, we've got, if I'm looking at it right, we have about $600,000 in a reserve for the future in that portion of the budget. So
we started off, it was actually 800,000, but we moved 200 into that capital line just in case we needed to do some fixes this year. But yeah, we have at the end of this fiscal year, we'll have roughly 800,000 available. We also continue to have conversations with the YCOM. As you know, the users right now, their users, I guess you could call it their subscriber fee, is a pass through between YCOM on their user dues into YCOM to the county for the radio system. That transfer right now sits at 270,300. Been talking with YCOM about the increase in 911 tax revenue that are coming in that we can put towards the dispatch center. One concept would be if we increased the transfer over to the radio system, that we would in essence be increasing the user's contribution to the radio system through an increase in that payment from Wycom, and it wouldn't offset any additional revenue that Wycom is getting from the 911 taxes that go directly to the 911 center. So we have the ability to possibly bring in some additional revenue every year that route. But yeah, definitely either way we look at it, we'll still have some funding that we're going to have to identify system wide, because even doing what I would consider as a Band-Aid, which would be just replacing our existing system just to bring us to normal and not doing any improvements, is more than what we have sitting in the bank.
So once we get a recommendation, would this just be something that we consider during budget discussions and look at options as far as, you know, interfund transfers, different options that we would have in-house? Ken?
Sorry, my mouse wasn't cooperating, so I can unmute. I think there's a couple different avenues, because I think the conversations like the sheriff is talking about as far as the governance, and then, you know, because I don't think, well, one, determining which option, you know, the county's going to proceed would help, you know, once that decision or is finalized, that helps kind of gives us a target point on where we're going for funding and how much funds we need. Because then I think we'd also have to take a step back and look at, you know, is this what is the cost share, you know, what portion, you know, is the burden of the county, which, you know, that, and then working with Wycom and like the sheriff was talking about. So there's a couple different avenues that we could look at. I mean, this could be included as part of the budget adoption process, but if it all depends on the speed with which making a decision on the path, because recognizing that there's an immediate, you know, there's some immediacy in making these upgrades to the system. So I think depending on the amount, you know, and then we would have to take a step back and look at the possible funding options and what's available, and whether that's built into the budget or if it's continuing to put Band-Aids on things. It depends on how quickly the upgrades need to happen as well.
Thank you. Sheriff, what are you looking at as far as a timeline on your wish list to Santa?
Well, I was just waiting for Ken to give me the code that I was supposed to code this to, and we'll just go from there. I don't think my MasterCard's got it high enough.
He said no. Nope.
No, I think
Wrong answer.
Yeah, this was more, I think, just, you know, and I'm not going to put you guys on the spot, but I think for your guys's thought process over the next few weeks is to kind of look through this document. And then, like I said, I'll provide you the full 160 some page document that you can read over the holiday season. And, but I think this is more of just a conversation from your perspective of what you would like to see from a county owned system moving forward, understanding that that decision is going to have some sort of impact on the rest of our users. And I'm going to start the conversation with the other users saying, hey, these are the couple options we're looking at, to try to get a gauge from them of what their support is going to be. Because if the majority of the user group and the members support a concept of moving forward with a digital P25 system, knowing that there's going to be a huge increase in their cost for mobile replacement and portable replacement, but they're willing to do that and have that conversation to try to share the cost. I think that is an important decision piece for you guys to know that that's part of their thought process, because we could, in theory, just decide, okay, we're going to go that route and go to the other users and say, here's your price tag, which in essence is get off my soapbox, which would happen in WACA. If they made a decision to move forward with new technology, they'd just be sending me a bill and I would have to pay an additional cost. And I don't really have much say in it. But I don't think that's necessarily the intent for our county to do in that version. So I'm going to start having those conversations. But then from your guys' perspective, if you're thinking, okay, we should be looking at this particular piece. My personal feeling is just knowing how technology is and where things go and how quick technology changes. My gut tells me we should be looking at the P25 digital option, which is not bringing us to current, but not going to WACA. It's kind of right in the middle. But that's just because I understand how technology works and how quick it changes, and to be able to have our ability in the county to have all that equipment ready. Yes, we could do with the replacing of our system, just bringing us to where we should be, and then upgrade that at a later time. But it's kind of, you're going to be paying double because you're going to do one system and then you're going to have to pay to upgrade it later. So my gut was telling me to try to find a way to get the users around the concept of moving forward with some sort of P25 digital option, with the understanding that our users are now going to be paying additional costs for some of their equipment. And then on top of it, which is a whole nother conversation of the concept of the maintenance, some of these maintenance options allow for us to pay a little bit more than what we're paying right now for the maintenance of our system, but we get so much more out of it. We would get a tech 24/7 that can come out and help us. They would be maintaining our portables and our mobiles to make sure the maintenance on them are kept up. They'd be taking a look at all the fire pagers to make sure they're up to date and the batteries are good. I mean, it's all the preventative maintenance that we aren't doing right now that we're just pushing off to these other users would be something that would be part of that countywide maintenance fee, which is all part of the fees that are coming from those user agencies through YCOM. So hopefully that answers a little bit of the question. And if you don't have a budget line yet, that's fine. We can work. I'll work with Ken later to figure out what line we want to use.
Thank you. Commissioner Kula?
Yes, thank you. So Sheriff, am I correct in stating that the towers and the equipment currently is Yamhill County owned? And that it's really the radios that are each agency, right?
Correct. Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, all the tower sites and the equipment that at the towers, county owned and operated and maintained. But then any mobile in the vehicle or an ambulance and all the portables are at the agency's required purchase and maintenance.
Okay. And then so if we as a county then switched over to P25, our own radio systems upgrades, that would all work, but we would be leaving everybody else behind as part of that YCOM upgrade, right? So it really, they're not going to be able to communicate unless we get them on board, right?
Correct. Yeah. Even my deputies in my patrol cars, we would have to replace our mobiles and portables because they just wouldn't work on the system.
Okay.
And there's multiple different funding options out there. There's various grants that we can look at. Homeland Security grants we've traditionally used to help pay for some of these projects. I think if we were to research an application for a grant for a large contribution for some system upgrades for interoperability concepts, I think we might be available to have some funding there. So those are funding options that, of course, we'll continue to look at to help mitigate as much effect as possible on county and the other users.
Okay, thank you, Sheriff. I just was thinking, if it's helpful for you, so that when you go to users, you can say, here's where we're going, and we want you on board. Is that I would say that I would support this upgrade to the P25, knowing that, recognizing that, like the broadband for community residents, this is one of the backbones of all of your work and all of our like mission of public safety. So to that end, I want to say that like I support this moving forward, and so that if it helps you in talking to users and agencies about where your budget is going with it, and obviously there's the American Rescue Plan money, and it is going in lots of different places, but that is a source potentially for some of this, right? And I'm open to the conversations going forward. I just want to put that out there for you.
No, I appreciate that. And I think I shared the link for the YouTube channel with a lot of the users. So my guess is there's quite a few of them on board. And that's part of the conversation piece for a couple weeks when I meet with them, is to make sure they understand that we're just not going to make a decision that's going to affect them without at least having them at the table to be part of that conversation, because it is going to affect users across the county. But I think if we do it the right way and we look at it the right way and prepare for it appropriately, I don't think we're going to feel the sting as much as we could if I was just to throw it on them and say, sorry, this time next year, you're going to have all brand new equipment.
Okay, sounds good. If there are no other questions, I want to thank Comms Northwest. Appreciate the information and the work on this. And Sheriff, we'll just wait for further input from your discussions with our partners. And then also, I'm sure you and Ken will be having some more detailed conversations. But I think it's, looking at that collaboration with WACA, I know it's been something in the past that we've had concerns about, and there were some red flags. So I think we're probably all looking at the best option for the county might not include that, but that's just initial thoughts. So if there's nothing else, anything
Chair,
else?
I would echo that, just so that you get a little bit more backup, is that I appreciate, we need to be able to communicate with everybody. I just don't know I don't see as big of a value in us being able to communicate across the metro area through somebody else's network, when we will be able to do that if needed through the P25 upgrade.
Right. And I think that autonomy is really important, especially out here for us. So Sheriff, thank you. Comms Northwest, thank you very much. We appreciate that. And I'm going to suggest we take a 5-minute break, because we have another work session coming up, and that promises to be lengthy as well. So we'll take a short break and a short recess, and then we'll come back. Thank you, Sheriff. Thanks,
Thank
Comms
you.
Northwest.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Looks like everybody made it back. Thank you all. I appreciate that. We'll go ahead and come back into our formal informal session. The Yamhill County Board of Commissioners, December 2nd, 2021. And we're at the point of item E2, which is our work session number 2, which is a review and discussion of economic development services with SEDCOR. And Abhishek Stone, thank you for joining us. Appreciate your patience through the first work session. And Eric Anderson from SEDCOR is joining us as well. So thank you both for being here. Let's go ahead and begin our discussion with the last time. Basically, we were looking at a variety of some of the specifics that SEDCOR had brought to us on one of the grant programs. But now I think we're looking at the larger discussion of economic development services with SEDCOR that we have been partnering with. And now as we look at the contract expiration at the end of the month, we wanted to talk a little bit more about the perhaps the scope of work or some of the ideas that the commissioners had. So we'll begin with Ken.
Yeah, and I just thought I could kind of kick things off with a little bit of background. And I know that Avishai is prepared, has a presentation, and then I'll turn it over to Avishai and Eric to provide the next. You know, just for a little bit of context and background on the agreement that we currently have with SEDCOR. So back in 2017, the then board of Commissioners decided to go out, put out an RFP to look at contracting out economic development services. So we went through an RFP process. We entered into, SEDCOR was selected out of that competitive process, and we entered into our first contract in 2018. And there's been 2 amendments. One was a really small amendment. The last amendment that we did in 2019 was an extension to the original contract that has us where we're at right now, and so the contract is set to expire at the end of December of this year. So there's a couple of amendments, and I shared the information with the commissioners with the contracts. And anytime we're really talking about the scope of work, you really have to go back to the original agreement, the 2018 agreement, which included the exhibits that had the scope of work. Again, that was part of the underlying agreement that we've made, you know, a couple of amendments to. So with that, I just wanted to share really quickly just a real base coat of, you know, going back to 2017 and the RFP. And there was a lot of discussions, but I recognize that a lot of us here were probably not in those meetings or participating in those original discussions that were happening back in 2017, except for Mary. I'll look at Mary. So, and Christian, he was at the table as well. But, and at this point, I'll just turn it over to Avishai.
Thank you, Ken, for that. Abhishek?
Thank you, Ken. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. I hope you all had a good Thanksgiving holiday. I was actually grateful to be able to sit through the emergency communications conversation with Sheriff Svensson. We had worked with him and Online Northwest to discuss whether there could be a partnership on towers in terms of broadband expansion as well. And I feel confident that he'll continue to pursue those opportunities as he upgrades the towers in Yamhill County. So that was actually quite interesting. So thank you. So Eric and I did prepare a presentation in order to offer again some of the background that Ken mentioned and say what has been transpiring the last several years as SEDCOR has been working on this contract, and then how do we see things going in the future. So I know Miss Carolina gave me an opportunity to screen share here, so I will share my screen and then Eric and I will kind of tag team as we go through this presentation. All right, can you see my screen in presentation mode?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you, Abhishek, and good morning, everybody. I'm happy to be here and share the work we've been doing with Yamhill County over the past few years. As Ken mentioned, I think both Abhisha and I weren't here as well for the original discussion with the contract process. So we're all kind of learning as we go forward on this. I thought we'd just start a little bit with a little bit of background on, I think you're all aware what SEDCOR is, but we're private nonprofit, 501c6, covering Marion, Polk, and Yamhill counties. Our technical name is the Strategic Economic Development Corporation of the Mid-Willamette Valley, Oregon, which we found out when we had to apply for some federal funds. We've been around for 40 years. Next year will be our 40th anniversary. And, I think there's, in addition to the work that we do in each of our counties, that we have specific work contracts with the city of Salem and Marion County and the city of Dallas and Polk County. We also, pride ourselves on the regional work that we have and the connectivity between communities and counties and opportunities and industries throughout the 3 counties. And one thing is our work plan becomes more diverse. I think the one key we want to be sure that we leave folks with is that our work is industry driven. When we identify new opportunities for us to be working on, it's coming from our industry partners and what we learn from them as we do outreach and have opportunities to learn where their challenges and where their potential opportunities are as well. Here's a brief timeline just to get us all on the same page as far as how we got to today. As you can see, in 2017, as Ken mentioned, that's when the commission published the RFP for economic development professional services. SEDCOR was awarded the 2-year contract in 2018. We hired Abhisha Stone, who you know well, as our Yamhill County Economic Development Manager to do this work, primarily in working with us and our marketing team and other folks that we bring to the table. At that time, we also secured space with MEDP in the city of McMinnville. So we had local office space available, and that also helped us to be sure we were coordinating with the MEDP team. And in November of 2019, the contract was extended for a year. And now we have an option for 2 additional year extensions. I'll hand it over to Abhisha to talk about what she's been doing.
Thank you, Eric. So I did want to start by giving just a recap of the work that we had done prior to COVID, because obviously that was a major transition in the work that we were doing, and then what has transpired since then. So at the beginning of our contract, there was a heavy emphasis on business recruitment into the region, with a focus on aligning those efforts with what was understood to be the needs of industry, right? So that was an attempt to localize supply chain and to round out our industry partners in the healthiest way for our communities. So what we were initially reporting on with that focus was the number of company visits, the numbers of jobs that were created, and then the amount of industry investment in Yamhill County. So I'm sure you will not recall, because this was now quite some time ago, but at the end of that 2-year period, our numbers for March 2020 was 227 company visits, 107 jobs created, and $5.2 million in industry investments in Yamhill County. Now, the way that we report these numbers is when they've been actualized. So we're not reporting numbers based on what our industry partners tell us they're going to do. And that's why sometimes it takes a while for these numbers to evolve, is because we look at what's actually been accomplished as the projects are completed, so that we're giving you accurate understanding of investments. So of course, when the pandemic hit, SEDCOR's work shifted to aiding businesses and really navigating the ever-changing landscape, right? There was a lot of regulatory changes in terms of how they could operate. There were opportunities for resources available to them, and we worked very closely with our industry partners to try to connect them to those resources, to identify partners who would be managing those resources, like the PPP loans and things like that. We live in an amazing region. And we had a lot of our industry partners emerge as PPE suppliers. In part, I think that that was a smart move for their own businesses to maintain continuity. And for several of them, they were actually still quite busy, but found opportunities and ways to support the local economy and the region in getting PPE out to folks. And there's two examples of photos here. St. Cusaire shifted and started producing hand sanitizer. We also know, of course, that many of our distilleries did the same thing. And then this is a photo of DCI actually making a delivery of PPE to the county emergency management team, and that was facilitated by SEDCOR. So we worked very closely with these partners to ensure that their efforts made it to the right places, connecting them to market opportunities in terms of things like hand sanitizer, and worked to facilitate a lot of donations directly to our hospitals and emergency management folks. At the same time, we were recognizing that this connectivity could happen a little bit faster if we had direct access on our website. So this is a snapshot of one of the pages of the SEDCOR PPE supplier list. So we started a regional PPE supplier list, got that information out to all of our businesses and partners in the state of Oregon. We actually launched our PPE supplier list before Oregon, the state, launched theirs. And it was the efforts of this region, Marion, Polk, and Yamhill County. And there was one other county that had started doing work on the same type of work that influenced and drove the way that the state put together their PPE supplier list. So we worked very closely with them to ensure that all of the PPE suppliers in our region were on the state supplier list, and worked in partnership with them to ensure that these supplier lists were relevant, that they were updated and easily accessible. So that brings me to kind of going through the numbers last year. We had also shifted the way that we reported. So for the first 2 years, SEDCOR was provided a template by the county on how they wanted to see reporting happen. And at the end of that template period, I came before the board and requested input on how you would like to see us report ongoing. At that same time, the pandemic hit, and that really changed our focus as well. So we went to more of a narrative report on a quarterly and annual basis to ensure that you felt really informed about what was happening to our economy, how our business partners were being impacted, and what we were doing to address those needs. So you haven't seen these numbers conveyed this way since the end of 2020. So I wanted to make sure you have a chance to look at them. So year-to-date numbers, if we're looking at them the same way that we did during the first section of our contract period, is that 250 in-person company visits and more than 500 phone internet contacts with businesses. That was really due to COVID, right? So the in-person visits had to stop or slow down at the very least. And so we started having a lot more of these kinds of meetings, right? So the Zoom culture emerged. And we have now actualized $26.2 million in industry investments in Yamhill County that SEDCOR has been a part of. I want to talk a little bit more about one of the values that SEDCOR brings to this partnership with Yamhill County, which is bringing dollars into the region. How do we leverage the good work of Yamhill County, our communities, our industry partners, to bring more resources into the community? And as you may recall, in May of 2020, SEDCOR partnered with Marion County, the Council of Governments, the Willamette Workforce Partnership, to submit an application to Business Oregon for the Regional Business Grant Program. This work was really driven by SEDCOR and our partner in Marion County at the time, Jason Schneider. In response, and I would be remiss not to emphasize how appreciative we were that the Council of Governments stepped up and said, you know, as a 501c6, SEDCOR didn't qualify to be an applicant. So we partnered with the COG and they said, we will 100% be the fiscal agent and the applicant for these funds so that we can bring them into the region. And them stepping up to do that was pretty phenomenal. We ended up submitting that grant proposal 3 different times and secured a total of $1.092 million for the 3-county region for business grants. So I know I've shown you these numbers before. Some of them have changed since the report that I gave you in, I believe it was January of 2021, which was a 7-page report on the 2020 recap. So I want to give you some updated numbers and kind of put them all into a single document for you. Based on all of that work for trying to secure additional funding, we're talking about CARES Act funding as well, included in some of these numbers. Yamhill County hosted over $2 million in grant programs that went directly to our business partners. One of the ways that SEDCOR either pivoted or extended the work that we had been doing was to be a lot more active in the development of grant programs with county staff during this time. So Yamhill County was one of the first counties in our area to launch a business grant program. I appreciate the fact that you all asked for us to come before you and make a recommendation. Because of that immediate relief grant program, we were able to leverage those funds to secure that $1.092 million from the state. That allowed Yamhill County, through the CARES Act funding and the round 4 funding through the state, to actually issue $2.189 million directly to businesses. The city of Newburgh also hosted a $140,000 grant program shortly after the IRGP. I participated with their team in developing that program and sat on the grant review and recommendation committee for them as well. Through the funding that we were able to secure through the state, the partnership with the COG and Willamette Workforce Partnership, $775,000 through that partnership and those programs got into Yamhill County businesses as well. The city of McMinnville ended up hosting a grant program for $52,000, and then Business Oregon hosted their round 4 grant program at a state level, and I wasn't able to get published numbers on what the impact was just for Yamhill County. Without including that, total grant dollars into Yamhill County was $3.1 million, and the total businesses who received grants were 761. I also want to point out that the county additionally committed to some really important areas of focus with a $400 grant for childcare affordability and $500,000 for the rural broadband expansion project. A little bit more about the COVID focus shift. You've probably all heard me say this many times, but the work that SEDCOR does is industry-led and informed. That's how we approach this work. So as we started talking to our industry partners and asking them, what are you struggling with? What do you need? What could be the solutions to those problems? A few things obviously emerged, childcare being one of them. So we really focused heavily on how do we not just support the expansion of capacity, but how do we support the expansion of affordability in the childcare desert that is Yamhill County. We also provided a great deal of support for retail, nonprofits, and commercial businesses, which is not our primary area of focus, but certainly was a huge area of need. And we did that through partnerships with downtown associations, with CDFIs, with our chambers of commerce, and with our municipalities directly, especially those that don't have those other partner type organizations in their communities. Housing, especially workforce housing, has been a really big concern as the cost of living has gone up, the cost of land, the cost of the price to build a building, and of course the timeline that it takes based on supply chain issues. So in terms of workforce development, what our industry partners are saying is this childcare and housing issues are really obstacles for us to attract people to the area. So we've been spending a lot of time focusing on those areas. Also, of course, it goes back to workforce, right? So we approach this in a lot of really creative ways. We partnered with seasonal ag worker contractors in the region to try to get some of those folks who were in a down season during the kind of the off ag season into our manufacturing facilities. It was a wonderful partnership, really helped to create opportunities for those industry partners to meet end of year deadlines, helping them to stay out of the red coming toward the end of 2020. It was a phenomenal program, and we hope to continue that program into future years. We've also partnered with regional partners like Chemeketa to help develop their hospitality training program, which we're now seeking funding for. And that is entirely a Yamhill County program. And then, of course, the West Valley Career Technical Education Center, right? That's the future of workforce, and how do we support that? Supply chain, as you know, has been a big point of conversation as a major emphasis for SEDCOR. Rural broadband we'd be remiss not to have that on this list. And of course, the work that SEDCOR has done in supporting community visioning. I've shared with you the work that we did in the city of Yamhill. Carlton and Amity are currently also contracting with RDI to move forward on doing some of that strategic planning in terms of economic development. And SEDCOR is an active partner at the table. We also participated in the City of Newburgh Economic Opportunity Analysis. I sat on the advisory team. And what we do when we participate in those groups is that we provide that industry perspective and that economic opportunity perspective. So this is a summary of some of those ways that we participate in community engagement, just highlighting some of the committees, consortiums, councils, roundtables that either I sit on or lead or support our community partners by participating in. Now, this list of funding secured and supported is not an all-inclusive list, and some of these numbers I shared with you in previous slides, but I do believe that there are some things that you might not be aware of that I want to make sure you understand that SEDCOR works on. For example, we helped the city of Willamina secure $50,000 for their childcare project. You already know about Project Oasis, and we've been keeping you updated on work that's going on there. They have a planned opening for their McMinnville facility in December, and we're very excited about that. But we're also working with the city of Newburgh to see if we can submit for a CDBG grant for childcare affordability. Again, this is because of the work that Yamhill County did in investing in affordability, that we can look at this and say, there's an opportunity for CDBG funding that is for scholarship programs for affordability. We have this partner who's doing this work. We're trying to bring in some additional money for that. And then they were also able to secure an additional $50,000 for their McMinnville facility through the Early Learning Division grant program. I also wanted to make sure you were aware of the work that we do directly with our businesses. So one example, the third to last bullet here is SEDCOR supported a grant request that was secured for ADEC. When they started their PPE production, we were able to secure a $25,000 grant for them. At the time, they had a significant decrease in their manufacturing. They were trying to keep their employees working, and they were trying to support local hospitals in getting access to PPE. So that grant, those grant dollars were able to help them kind of get over that hump and ensure that they could move forward with the training of their employees into this new product line that they were trying to create and get that product out to our local hospitals. Also, I had shared with you the ERP program, which was a local manufacturer, local systems developer. Buildable had been working with OMEP on trying to find a solution for small to mid-sized manufacturers that was around the enterprise resource planning tool, which is that kind of base, that foundation of manufacturing organizations to really understand their cost model. And we were able to, so we jointly wrote for a grant to Business Oregon and secured $211,000 so that they could continue building out the two modules that they were focused on for our region, which was ag and standard costing, and then run a pilot program. Again, this was in partnership with Buildable, MEDP, and OMEP. And then, as I had shared with you last year, SEDCOR received a $465,000 grant from EDA for regional ag tech innovation. So this is a 3-county grant for regional ag tech innovation. And again, I've already shared some of that with you, and Eric will probably talk a little bit about it in a future slide. But again, I just wanted to make sure you understand some of this work we do directly with businesses and at a regional level, and monies that were secured outside of the business grants. So when we talk about, well, what is SEDCOR currently doing in Yamhill County? What is Abishaw currently working on? Some of this stuff, again, is recap, so I'll go through it quickly. But as you're aware, we have worked with Willamette Workforce Partnership in implementing their youth workforce training program, which is the Sidewalk Project. That program was approved for partnership by the city of Newburgh in 2020. We still had some hurdles with COVID related to local contractors having capacity to help us manage this program. So that's been delayed a little bit, but we're moving forward with the city of Carlton for plans for a program in 2022. And the city of Carlton just approved that a few months ago, and we're really excited to be working with them. We have secured multiple industry donations, from wood for forming to concrete donations. We are working on a donation for the tools and belts and everything else that the youth participants need in order to be able to do this work. We secured $25,000 from a private donor. We have a commitment from the city to expedite permitting, forego fees, and develop a community sidewalk repair grant program. And I currently am in conversations with a local large foundation to help us close the gap for funding on that project. Of course, you're aware of DCI and their Project Oasis as we talk about industry partner for childcare projects. ADEC also announced that they're working on a similar type of a program, and I have 2 additional industry partners who have not yet made their projects public, and you know that we support their confidentiality until they're prepared to make these things public, but we do have 2 additional sizable industry partners who love what DCI is doing, respect the county's commitment to that work, and are looking to do similar things themselves, which is all very promising. I have spoken to you all about the need for industrial property preparedness in Yamhill County. And when we talk about recruiting new businesses, that conversation doesn't go away. If anything, it gets emphasized. The state has also renewed an interest, emphasis, and funding support for preparing industrial properties. We have certainly been partnering with the city of Newburgh on the Newburgh Mill site development. We have 2 privately held agricultural and industrial zoned properties that are listed for industrial use in Sheridan and Lafayette that are privately held. And this is part of our obstacle, is that we do have quite a few of these types of properties, but without understanding an incentive on what the best potential use for these properties could be, and the fact that we have industry who would be interested in purchasing these properties, it is hard to approach current owners and say, hey, will you work with us to prepare your property and list it for sale? So one of the things that we're currently doing is partnering with Commissioner Berschauer on exploring the Rural Industrial Incentive Program. And that type of a program is one of those tools that we can come before them with. As I mentioned, the state has interest in supporting more of this industrial lands development. They've also considered funding for privately held property to bring it out of a brownfield sort of an environment and get it shovel ready. Previously, those dollars were only available to jurisdictions. Now they're looking at making funding potentially available to private landowners. This is a huge opportunity for us, and in conjunction could be a really great opportunity for us to go to those landowners and say, these are the resources available. This is the interest in your property. Will you work with us to get prepared? When it comes to our available lands inventory, we cannot include unlisted properties on available lands inventory with the state. They have to be listed and they have to have a price. So that's the obstacle. How do we get there with these folks who are interested, right, in selling their property for those purposes? Looks like one of my bullets got mixed up here, but Newburgh Workforce Housing Consortium, I've shared with you my work with that group for a good long while. We have a very strong partnership with the state trying to identify opportunities on how we can move that forward. And we have spoken to folks like Missing Middle Housing, which is a new nonprofit organization that's doing design sprints for affordability, trying to incentivize developers to create new ways of making affordable housing that can be commercialized. So we're looking at whether we can consider doing a design sprint in the city of Willamina. That's a recent conversation that's come up because we want to bring more of this activity into our region, and then hopefully utilize the resources from all the partners to create some projects around this. I've already shared the sidewalk project. I believe that you know the work and support I've provided for Stratus Village, which of course is the affordable housing project in McMinnville. I set up a meeting with the director of the Yamhill Housing Authority and partners from the state for next week. So this is work that we're constantly supporting and doing. I've talked about the Chemeketa Hospitality Workforce Training Program. We helped provide valuable input to create that program and are trying to get some funding. I'm currently also undergoing a county-wide business retention expansion survey of industry partners. This work takes a lot of time, and we sit directly with each of our industry partners and go through a very long survey that includes what's going on with their business, what's going on with their industry, what they feel we could do, the cities could do, the county could do to support them better. How they view the community and the way that the community does or doesn't support workforce, and how recommendations that they might have on expediting permits or SDC charges. I mean, kind of really runs the gamut. We're looking to use this information to inform the EDAC as we make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners early next year on use of next year's ARPA funding for impacted industries. So as we mentioned, we're looking to do data capture through our work at SEDCOR and with other partners, hopefully so that we don't have to utilize that additional funding to secure a consultant. We know we can do this work ourselves. We just need to afford ourselves time to do it. So we're working very diligently to get that done. And then we have multiple industry partner expansion projects that are on the horizon, especially now that some of these industry partners see us being in a recovery phase, and many of them are looking at automation to help buffer their workforce issues. So these are just some of those projects that we're currently working on in Yamhill County. I'll turn it over to Eric to talk a little bit more regional about the work we're doing.
I just wanted to, thank you, Abishai. I just wanted to quickly share with the commission the work that we do on a regional basis that does also impact and provide opportunities to Yamhill County businesses. The under entrepreneurial work, you've already heard about our Ag Innovation Hub and the funding we received from the U.S. Economic Development Administration. We've also been able to secure philanthropic funds and local match, including some funding from MEDP to start our own venture catalyst program here. A gentleman named Mike White is here to help businesses in all 3 counties and entrepreneurs try to grow their business and attract investment income. One of the successes we had over the last couple of years in that is actually forming our first angel fund for this region, the Mid-Valley Angel Fund. And that's going into its 2nd year right now. We're starting small, $50,000 to $60,000 range, for smaller projects. But that's how Bend started many years ago as well. So we're hoping to at least follow some of in their footsteps as far as entrepreneurial resources. And a lot of this work has allowed us to really engage more formally with the Technology Association of Oregon and Oregon Entrepreneurs Network and other groups. And I know I've kind of felt over the years that our region gets kind of skipped from the Portland-based organizations that say they're statewide, but then they, when push comes to shove, they head down to Eugene or over to Bend and say, okay, we've got the state covered, but they kind of miss the Mid-Valley right in their backyard. And our work has really helped us to form much stronger bonds with these organizations. And they really kind of get where our opportunities are in the region, particularly as it relates to agriculture, value-added ag, and what we call the 3-dimensional supply chain that involves everything from warehouse and distribution to artwork that goes on wine labels and beer bottles to the manufacturing equipment that actually does the harvesting and other work. One of the projects that we've just loved this year has been Yamasa, a soy sauce company based here in Salem. It's a very interesting process to make soy sauce, and part of their product is a 500-year-old starter from Japan. But another important part of their process is wheat, and they had been bringing in wheat from the Midwest and Canada because we just didn't grow the kind of wheat that they required, the hard red wheat in the region. And we were able to connect with the Abishai's help, Runeclaw Farms outside of Amity. They said, hey, we're willing to give it a shot, and started with 20 acres, and that's now grown to 100 acres. And I think there's more opportunity in the region to not just grow wheat for a specific customer like Yamasa, but also other businesses that are here looking for ways to fortify their local supply chain and also kind of fortify our own food security in the region. We've already talked a bit about the PPE supplier network, the 17 businesses that we were able to line up for that. But I think one of the things we also learned in that process was having a 3-county focus and being able to work with state agencies, including DAS, to really get those businesses in front of DAS, to identify how there are local opportunities to fill these needs and not necessarily depending on foreign made or even outside of Oregon made products. And that was a real win for us. put us in a difficult position at times when, the state was telling us that there's all these Chinese made masks that we needed to distribute. And we said, well, we actually make them in this region and we try to support the folks that make them. So, but getting that point across to our state leadership was very important. And the last thing on this list, kind of hot off the presses, we just submitted an application to Business Oregon for Small Business Technical Assistance Grant. This would be a 1.5-year program, really targeting underserved populations. And we're doing this in partnership. We were asked to take the lead as a consortium application with the Latino Business Alliance, a company called Advanced Economic Solutions that works very closely with women-owned, minority-owned, and other businesses, and the Small Business Development Center at Chemeketa Community College. So we are hoping that if that's a successful application, we will have resources for some culturally appropriate and linguistically appropriate training available to entrepreneurs throughout the 3 counties. So we just wanted, I know there's a discussion to be had here. We just wanted to leave you with some, recommended next steps from SEDCOR's perspective to kind of start the conversation. We would hope to have the contract extended for another year as we continue to, work with the projects that we've been talking about here and others that we identify to really help address both the challenges of economic recovery, as well as in many cases, opportunities for businesses to grow during the recovery period. We go into 2022 with an update of our strategic plan at SEDCOR, and hopefully we will be having something that in the first quarter that we will be able to share with our partners. Commissioner Berschauer is a SEDCOR board member, and we look forward to her involvement as we take a look at where we stand right now and where the opportunities are in our region. As we work to finalize that strategic plan, we'd be coming back to the county and saying, okay, how does this mix with your priorities? How do we bring your priorities into our work so to be sure that we are being responsive to Yamhill County as a regional organization? And then finally, we would, probably a little bit earlier towards the end of next year, but the fourth quarter or even into the third quarter, start to work with the commission and with staff to identify where the next steps would be as far as future scope of work and doing things that truly reflect the activities that you would like to see SEDCOR promote and in concert with Yamhill County and your communities. We're happy to answer any questions you might have. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Abisha. That's a lot of information. Appreciate that. Commissioners, questions, comments?
Well, Chair, I will say that it's good to see all of your, well, not all of your work, but as best you can wrapped up into one presentation. So especially the updates from COVID land. So thank you for your work and thank you for presenting.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Berschauer.
Thank you, Chair. So just to kind of clarify a little bit on that last slide. So when you're talking about a grant, or I'm sorry, not a grant, a contract extension, we're talking about the scope of work that is in the current contract and just extending it versus having a discussion about perhaps tailoring that scope of work or changing it, because I want to make sure we're on the same page in terms of expectations.
I think we would certainly look to the commission and staff to figure out how that would best be moved forward. We could extend it just to be sure that the work continues on, and at the same time work towards updating the scope in that process. Or what we had suggested was keep the work going and then over time have a new scope ready for review later in the year. But that's, we're happy to work with you and however your time frame is on that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So at this point in time, Commissioner Kula.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say that I think given the tight time frame that extending the contract and then working on a revised scope of work that includes all of our priorities and kind of vision for economic development would be my recommended route as well. But Chair, I just want Ken also unmuted himself.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ken?
Oh, I only unmuted because I thought there was a question heading my way. So I wanted to make sure I could find my unmute button.
Okay, that was some preemptive unmuting. Okay. Do we have any questions for Ken? So I know what we're looking at is the current contract expires at the end of December. And we have options of year-to-year renewals. And so that's what we're looking at. So I think the discussion for the board is in terms of extending the contract, that's question number one, revising the contract, or revisions or suggestions on the duration of the extension. And those are a couple of the options that we have before us. So Ken, do you see anything else that would be part of this discussion for today?
Well, and I think, at times, and I think this is a larger discussion, for the board to have, because I know as, and especially if you go back to 2017 or 2016, you go back to previous years, and when you're having conversations around economic development services, and recognizing that we receive funds, we have economic development funds is what we utilize to fund programs to support economic development services. And, and there's a lot of questions and conversations really come up versus what's a better use of the funds? Is it better to have something more in-house, fully staffed up, and are we able to provide the same level of services and accomplish the outcomes that the board is wanting to see? Or do we look at, like we did, which is the decision that was made in 2017, let's do an RFP and contract economic development services to bring in those professional services and work with an organization that has those connections, has those backgrounds, is able to make contact, with the business community. They're not necessarily government knocking on the door. It's a partnership. So there's some discussions that I think that, depending on what the board wants to do long-term on what the ultimate goal is, if we want to continue to provide economic development services, whether in the current format, which is under a professional services agreement, or if we want to look at instead, I think there needs to be kind of a decision, and it's going to require some further discussions and budget and everything else, depending on which path the board wants to go, and just looking at the scope of work and looking at the deliverables and everything that's in there. There's a lot of questions that are out there, and I realize that, I don't think we're ready to kind of flush that out or have a full discussion on all these various areas right now at this point. I do, as I mentioned last time, because I know we're last week, I think it was last week when we met, it wasn't last Thursday, but last Monday, and we were having the discussions, as far as a staff recommendation, because depending on what the board wants to do long-term, I think those discussions can still be had. What I don't want to do is necessarily hit pause or hit stop on the services and the work that is happening right now, because I wouldn't have the ability right now with my staffing to be able to pick up where SEDCOR is right now on a number of projects and keep those things, moving forward very well. And so I would, as far as my recommendation is, I would hope that we would execute some form of an extension to continue the work and then if there's questions, comments, concerns, or modifications that the board would like to see made to the scope of work, that maybe there's something that SEDCOR is working on that is not included in the scope of work, that we make sure we capture that in the agreement, in the extension. Or if there's priority items that we really think that we need to make sure that this is still on the forefront, we can make sure that's also highlighted in a newer scope of work, or get that updated as well, and continue to have those conversations. So and on that, I know that that's a lot more than just answering a direct question, but those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Ken. Christian, this would be a question for you. As far as the contract, in terms of extensions, if the board were to suggest an extension that wasn't fully a year, that would be an entirely different process, where because you're not automatically just renewing it for the year. But if it were a shorter duration of time, what would that require on our end?
So it would simply involve conversations between the board and SEDCOR on what sort of an extension both parties are willing to consider and interested in, month to month, quarterly, semi-annual. The parties have agreed at this point to 2 1-year extensions. If both parties are willing to make an amendment, that could certainly be adjusted and changed.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Commissioners, thoughts on a couple of things going forward right now, in terms of we're looking at an extension of a year. We're also looking at scope of work issues. We're looking at work that's currently going on, and then we're looking at the overall suggestions. I have an entirely different perspective because I was here back in the day when we were, we did an RFP and we heard proposals from MEDP and from SEDCOR. And when we had a different setup and a different dollar amount, and it was significantly less money and a part-time person and a lot of business to business work being done. So I have a different perspective, but I would like to know what your thoughts are on, I know Commissioner Cooley, you've made a recommendation that you think we need to extend, allow the work to continue and go for the year extension. Is that fair?
Chair, I would say that my recommendation, based upon my understanding of the work that's happening by Abisha and SEDCOR, is that we do a 1-year extension and reassess the scope of work over the course of time, with the ideally with the making sure that projects that are in play continue so that they're not dropped. That would be in my view, fiscally irresponsible, because a lot of this work involves county investments.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Commissioner Berschauer, thoughts?
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to kind of open it up a little bit broader, because I think that and Abisha and Eric, this is kind of a more top level discussion as to what we see are the needs in the county. It's not just SEDCOR, but it does apply to the work that you do. So we are looking at, roughly $150,000 for a contract, an annual contract extension. If SEDCOR does the grant work that's been proposed, that's another roughly $140,000 in administrative fees that was proposed, at least. And then we have a full-time grants and special projects person who, with salary and benefits is probably close to about $100,000. So collectively, with all of this, we're looking at, upwards of $370,000 or so that we're looking at spending over the next year on business administration, or at least that function of the county. And it feels like a lot of money to me. And so what I was thinking of, and I've only been here for a year, so this is just my observation of, being here less than a year. And obviously this has been an incredibly difficult year, certainly not normal, quote unquote normal. But what I would like to see more of is that one-on-one, really customized relationship between whoever this business person is that's working and directly accountable to the county and our Main Street businesses. And a lot of those businesses are not connected. They're not the industry groups, they're the small mom and pop businesses. And I think that those folks have been disproportionately impacted over the past 2 years, unfortunately. So when I'm thinking of the vision going forward, what do I want to see in economic development? I really want to see somebody who is, you know, on that granular level, literally going out and meeting with every single business they possibly can in our county, being on a first name basis, you know, acknowledging that some businesses just don't want to be bothered with, right? But most just don't know what's going on. They don't have communication happening. They don't know what's out there and what's available. And you've done some of that work. I'm just thinking for the value of the money that we're talking about, that's a lot of money. And I would love to have it be much more granular. And like I said, first name basis. I'm so-and-so, you know, I'm with Yamhill County, I'm the small business champion or whatever. Tell me about your business. What are your needs and how can I help connect you? We're here for you. We work for you. That type of granular level. The other thing that I've noticed is, and this is consistent, whether it's just talking to small businesses, you know, here and there in the county, or being on larger calls like Regional Solutions, is that there's a huge lack of communication. People just don't know what's going on because they don't have that constant communication in front of them. And this came up on Monday. I think Abishar or Eric, you might have been on that call on Monday, but one of the local winery owners in Dundee said, look, people don't know what's going on. They have no idea. You know, how am I supposed to deal with a labor shortage if I don't know what's in front of me in terms of avenues of help? So that's another issue. That's not your fault. That's another issue. And actually, we're going to talk about that a little bit later in this meeting. But it does kind of all go back to this issue that I see, which is really having a stronger champion locally for us here, and focusing on not just the larger industry partners, but also and the people who are naturally government connected, but focusing on the folks that, you know, make up Main Street down the road here and aren't necessarily connected. So, you know, as we're having this discussion, that's the mind frame that the frame of mind that I have is this is a little bit of a larger discussion about potentially restructuring or adding positions in the county that will help facilitate all of this to make it work more efficiently. But I do think that that dollar amount, that $360,000 or $370,000, just that's right in front of us over the next year, that's a lot of money. I'm not sure I'm totally comfortable with that amount just being spent on the administrative part of what we're supposed to be doing. Because really the county we're not like a grant machine, right? That's not what we're supposed to be doing. We facilitate that work, but you know, it feels like we're getting so heavy on that, and we're moving away from the granular, you know, boots on the ground connectivity that needs to happen with our small businesses to make sure they're supported. So that was a lot, but that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to just give a few of my thoughts from a sort of the historical perspective of this. And I know it's not constructive to compare the way things were, because things are different now, whether we like it or not. We don't have the same economy, and we don't have the same setup in terms of interpersonal relationships, because it's hard to get together with people. So I understand that and recognize that. But I remember the model that we had early on when we initiated we used our economic development, our video lottery dollars, I believe, to pay for a SEDCOR contract, which was a fraction of this. It was just a part-time fraction of the contract that we have now. There was a lot of business to business contacts. And I know that when you're looking at just, you know, base economics, is that consumer spending is one thing. Business to business spending really does drive the economy. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I think those are really things that we focused on in the past. A lot of for instance, local supply chain before supply chain became a problem, those types of things. I also look at the example of the McMinnville Chamber, and I know how actively they are working with their membership on the information that is critical to them now more than ever. So there's that hands-on with the local businesses. We know who they are. We know what their problems are. They know they can contact us, and the problem is addressed. So I like to use them as an example. And Joya specifically, she's got, as I said, that mother hen type of approach to her membership. I know it's hard to do on a countywide basis, much less 3 counties. So I acknowledge that. But I have been talking to other commissioners in other counties and smaller counties and saying, how are you doing this? Because I've seen that even the smaller counties have their own person in-house. They've got an economic development person in-house, and they know the people, they know the players, and they're basically, they are that's the handoff to the county, is this person between the business owners and the county. So I've heard them talk about having not only contracts with organizations like SEDCOR, but also having an in-house person. I also look at for instance, the number of grants. We've never done this many grants before, and it's labor intensive. It's really difficult on staff. But I think that if we're going to be paying, that comes down to $12,000 a month, and then using county staff to supplant that. So you're basically taking the cost of a county staff, in addition to the $12,000 a month that we're paying for SEDCOR, and you add those together, and it's a significant amount of money. So I look at this as what I would recommend at this point is we do want to see the work that's in the pipeline continue to go on, because there are those connections regionally and at the state level. I would like to see a shorter duration, whether it's 6 months, and that we look at that. And also to in terms of the impact industries grant, correct me if I'm wrong, but was the recommendation or the ask from SEDCOR 10% of the 1.3 million as an administrative fee? Did I get that wrong, Eric or Abisha?
Nope, that's correct.
Okay, so I'm looking at that as an enormous amount of money, administrative fee, which we could cover with the funds. However, I would recommend, and this isn't something I sent to Ken a while ago, is that we ask you to do that project for the base rate of your current contract. And then you won't be doing the other economic development work to the capacity that you are now, and you would have the capacity to address that limited term project. And then we could enter into that contract for this alone. This might be a little bit more specific than we want to get into right now, but I'm looking at the cost for that, cost for county staff, the cost for the $12,000 that we are paying right now for the existing contract, and I just don't see it. So these are my concerns going forward, but I don't want to leave the projects in the lurch, leave staff in the lurch, and that we want the work to continue. So those are just a few of my thoughts. Commissioner Kula.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to add my thoughts then, which include a series of questions. And one of those would be, Ken, do you feel like there is significant overlap between the work that our grants and special project manager does and the work that Abisha does? Are they doing the same work?
I would say, if you look at the positions, it's not, there's been a lot of cooperation between SEDCOR and the work that Carrie's doing, who's our grants writer. Keeping in mind that, the Carrie's position and what that program does, you know, was grants and special projects. And it's correct. We historically at Yamhill County have not been the grant provider. Historically, we're usually pursuing grants and pursuing funding opportunities to support projects and programs and services. And a lot of the projects that Carrie has worked on historically has been pursuit of funding to support policies, services, programs that the county's doing. But with the pandemic, the CARES Act, the ARPA funds, and the directions from the board to do emergent, you know, based on recommendations and policy decisions made by the board, you know, we also had to pivot that we were doing fewer grant applications and now having to administer programs to make funds available. And so our grant and special projects position, it has changed somewhat in the scope of work, because I really do, because that position is our internal expert when it comes to grants and grant programs, and being able to, in order to apply for a grant, you really have to be an expert on the mechanics of what a grant program looks like. And so it hasn't been an overlap that, you know, that the two positions are doing the same work. It's they have partnered on some of the specific business grants under the CARES Act, because Carrie, you know, would handle the administrative portions for the internal and for as far as the applications, the portal for applying, preparing materials to bring to the board, and then the post-award, getting all the agreements ready, getting all the process, working with the county. That's not something that SEDCOR would participate in, but then SEDCOR would be, over the last year, just looking at the grant programs that we did under CARES Act, was giving the recommendations, working with EDAC to help with that review committee, because they had the expertise on the EDAC committee to look at the business grants and make those recommendations to come back to the board. So it's not necessarily, I wouldn't call it an overlap or a duplication of services. I would almost call it that the two have complemented one another in being able to accomplish that, you know, and that's how we've been able to operate in rolling those out, because, you know, that's how we've done the other grants. Now, currently with ARPA, I think the struggles that we've had is you look at the sizable amount that we have available, and based on discussions with the board, the large portion of it being made available for sewer and water and sewer infrastructure and impacted industries and childcare. Those are very large programs. And then and we have, even though it seems like a large timeline, it's not really that large of a timeline to kind of get $21 million out the door and go through all of our processes and do that. And so then that's where I was taking a step back. And then based on the conversations we had, well, let's have a conversation with the CCO about the childcare portion of it. Let's have a conversation with SEDCOR about the impacted industries portion of it. And then I'm able to direct existing staffing resources on particular areas under ARPA to make sure that we're putting together solid programs. You know, so that's created a little bit of a change in that, just also based on lessons learned with the CARES Act grants that we did, because it was extremely time consuming to do those three projects and proposals that we did. To do those three programs. So I don't know if I answered your question, Commissioner. I know that was a long answer, because it's not a simple answer.
No, I mean, I know the difference. But so my second question then would be really for Christian and for my colleagues here, which is that when Commissioner Bershauer talks about an emphasis on connecting with Main Street businesses, what I hear is a different scope of work than the current one, which is to work with traded sector. businesses. And so to me, what I hear is let's revise the scope of work for the next round of contracts, or after extending a contract for some period, revising it to include those connections to Main Street businesses. The one caution I would have is that that represents a large policy shift in our own perspective on economic development advancement in the county. And I feel like we should have a longer conversation about whether we feel like us putting money into Main Street business promotion on an ongoing basis is what we as a board want to do. And especially given that we're not a chamber, Abisha is not a chamber, but that's really what I think of as chamber leadership does. So I just want to note that I'm pretty sure that this is an area that we could, if we wanted to, adapt a scope of work. And Christian, correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes, I think you could. I think it'd be also worth going back and taking a look at the scope of work that was in the original RFP. Make sure that we're not straying too far away from what it was that we originally went out with the solicitation for. Not that you couldn't change a scope of work that was different than what was in the solicitation, depending on the dollar value of the particular contract that we might be entering into. We might not need to go through an entire second RFP process, but I think it would be worth taking a look at that. But that being said, yes, I think there are certainly ways that we could look at modifying the scope of work to adapt to what the new goals and directions and desires of the board are.
Thank you. Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Kula. You're not wrong. I mean, this is definitely a broader conversation, and I'm just bringing forward a lot of ideas from what I've witnessed over the past year. I think one of my frustrations is that I see our staff doing most of the work, and I don't really see a share in that workload when it comes to grants. And my long-term concern is that most of these grants in the past 2 years have been COVID related. We're not always going to have COVID. So, you know, where does the bulk of that work go if we're committing ourselves to long-term contracts to do this work? So I think you're right. I think it is a larger conversation. And a little bit later in the agenda, I'm going to propose that we actually have a strategy session to talk about potentially restructuring or where are the gaps in our services, because we are a customer service organization. That's what we are supposed to be here for. So, but going back to the decision in front of us, I'm getting caught up on the dollar amount for the administrative part of what is supposed to occur over the next year. So whether or not, and I think Chair Starrett, I heard you say 6-month extension, but actually combine some of the workload so that we're not paying upwards of $300,000 for this work to occur over the next 6 months. I'm not sure if that was accurate, but the dollar amount to me is still, I can't quite get there on that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yeah, just to clarify a couple of things and to go back to something that Commissioner Kula said, I was not saying that we were duplicating services. What I was saying is that we were basically paying $12,000 a month to SEDCOR, and then county staff was doing a significant portion of that work. So of the work in terms of the grants. So I think we really need to start looking at the grant programs and how we want to address those. Then I threw in the impact industries grants, and I thought, well, we're going to pay 10% of 1.3 million on top of $12,000 a month. What my recommendation would be is to look at a short-term extension, have the impact industries grants be part of that, continue to do the work that's in the pipeline, but that 10% of 1.3 million would not be an additional administrative fee that we would be paying. Because I would like to have our own person. I'd love to have an in-house economic development person to do more of the overall work of that county-specific work. However, having said that, I think there obviously is the regional component that SEDCOR brings to it. So again, I'm not saying that we can't have a relationship with SEDCOR. What I'm saying is I think that $12,000 a month, we can probably revise that, limit the extension, and then look at the different scope of work that we might be interested in. And I do believe there was you know, again, paying a grants staff and then paying the $12,000 a month to SEDCOR. It seemed like there could have been some savings there in that we were duplicating the, not duplicating, but that we were using staff to do work that we were paying SEDCOR to some degree to do, not the implementation of the grants, but that's just a concern that I have. So I don't know how we go forward at this point, other than to say that we have the end of the month coming up and we're being asked to decide whether or not we're going to just sort of re-up as is. And I would not be in favor of that. Ken?
Well, my first thought was, you know, because I also realized that I don't want to renegotiate an extension of a contract. I don't know. I don't want to put Eric and Avishai in this position that we're, you know, potentially negotiating here in this format. As far as the next steps go, is based on all the feedback. I think the next step would be for me to have a conversation based on all the feedback that we've all received from the board at this point, and then have a conversation with SEDCOR on what the next, I want them to have some time to consider the feedback and the discussion that we've had today, and then to be able to look at it and because if we're looking at doing something a little bit different, because right now we're kind of mixing in the proposal on the ARPA and we're with the contract extension, and I realized that there's a relationship, but then I think at this point, because we haven't taken any formal action on the board hasn't taken any formal action on how to proceed with the impacted industries grant. That one's still kind of in a holding pattern where we have a timeline because we have an expiring contract to have a conversation about the what an extension might look like. If I'm hearing correctly that the board would be amenable to an extension of some form, but it sounds like you would like us to have some further conversations about what that extension looks like.
Yes, and the difficulty is that we do have a short timeline here. We're looking at, a number of weeks, and not to put SEDCOR in a difficult position, and also to be able to make sure everything continues to go forward. And the reason why I brought up the Impact Industries grant is because that's an additional ask, again, that 10% of 1.3 million. And we're also looking at that in addition to the current contract, which is $12,000 a month. So I think that they do there is some crossover there. Commissioner Kula?
Thank you, Chair. I don't think that's accurate to say that the grant administration fee for the impacted industries grants is an additional ask. I think it's incorrect to say that. I think it would be more accurate to say that that's a proposal that's been presented to us based upon the feedback that we gave to Avishai and what her Economic Development Advisory Committee presented to us. But I just want to note that I think that we were presented with a proposal in order to accurately and wisely and responsibly get this money out the door to the industries and in the directions that we proposed, that we said we wanted. So I just want to note that we don't have to do that proposal. We can go elsewhere for it, and we can even discuss with Ken in-house this particular grant project and whether we want to look for a staff member to do it. But I think that we should separate the two because it's not part of the contract. It's a separate thing, to me at least.
Well, yes, thank you, Commissioner. No, I understand, but at this point, we have before us a proposal for that administrative fee. So while we're going to continue to, we're discussing an extension of the contract, we also have to remember that this is also before us. So that again is an additional cost to the county. Although, you know, where it's coming from, obviously we can say it's, you know, ARPA money, but it all is on top of the fee that would be paid to SEDCOR. So I think we can't divorce those two at this point. We have to remember that these are two things in play right now, and we have to consider those. That's all I'm saying. Ken?
Well, the only thing that I was just gonna add is, you know, because we haven't taken any, you know, the board hasn't taken any formal action on the proposal for the ARPA funds. And I think, you know, the other part would be that if the board says, yeah, we like the proposal and the targeted outreach and where this needs to go, but Ken, we want you to figure out a way to implement this and not have SEDCOR do it. That's something that the board could say, and then I would have to, figure out how I'm going to do it. You know, again, I would just look at it that, that's a decision that the board, it's going to be subject to further discussion. And if I need to take a look at that, because there is concerns about the administrative fees that are associated with that, I could take a step back and look at that particular program area and then look, well, okay, because also recognizing, because when I first had this conversation with SEDCOR, this is something that's rather unique to SEDCOR. And they, again, it was, we had a discussion because on how to make this happen. And I think it's not unique to Yamhill County to have this struggle when we're facilitating grant programs. How do we fit that into the administrative, administering those types of functions and with the limited staffing that we have in this type of area. And that's why, the original thought in approaching SEDCOR is I was looking at a way to, again, we have a very ambitious plan to get a number of grants out with these ARPA funds. And I'm trying to be, creative and utilize as many partnerships as possible. And I don't think it's going to be unusual that even if we were to, it doesn't matter who the partner is that we're working at, and even looking internally, I'm going to be looking at potential, how am I going to offset the administrative costs for administering this full $21 million? And it's something that I'm also having to look at because, resources are limited and really dedicated to a lot of areas, and this is not without its challenges. So I just wanted to add that I think there's further discussion that could be had on the impacted industries. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. All right, so as far as, go ahead, Commissioner Kula.
Chair, I just wanted to note that Eric Anderson has his virtual hand raised.
Thank you, Commissioner Kula. I just wanted to thank you for the discussion. And I just want to reiterate that we did look at that impacted industries, response as a kind of separate project. So we're certainly willing to take a look at, how we piece that together, particularly if we're going to be looking at doing an update to our scope of work. I think our concern was just that a lot of that work we haven't done before when it comes to these kinds of direct administration of a grant. We're getting better at it with the EDA funds and some other things. We did do a fair bit of research, contacting some of our colleague organizations just to get a ballpark figure of what an admin fee would be. So, that is based on kind of the low end of industry standards from a nonprofit grant writing perspective, that 10%. But if we, we'll talk with our director of operations here, who would be, responsible for a lot of the reporting on that part of it. And as we, take a look at it, and as you kind of prioritize where you'd like to see us go, that's something we could, take another run at if you decide you want us to coordinate that.
Thank you, Eric. And so as far as reporting goes, Ken, what portion of that administrative function would be SEDCOR's or the person who, or the organization that worked on that? And how much of that would be the county's reporting responsibility?
Well, that's the step that is missing, because at this point we had a concept that was proposed. In order for us to release the funds and execute the grant, we would have to enter into some form of an agreement to then outline, because we haven't even gotten that far along. If we're talking about, and sorry, I don't have numbers in front of me, but if, let's say, the 2.2 million that's being made available for impacted industries, we haven't even gotten that far down the road on whether or not we're going to grant the 2.2 million to the organization that's going to host the funds and make sure the funds are put out to the community and host the grants and do all that and have the administrative fee. All that would be included in an agreement before we could release the funds. So then any reporting requirements attached to that would be spelled out in that agreement, because what we would be basically doing is acting as a pass-through, or we would have a sub-recipient that, hey, here's an agreement, we're going to release $2.2 million. We want you to go and use it in this fashion for under these parameters. And then we want you to ensure that you're entering into agreements, that you're collecting the data that then would filter back to us. So then any treasury reports that I would make would be consistent with that. Now, typically, if it's like under CARES Act or some of these other ones, that I would be saying, hey, we wrote a check for $2.2 million for impacted industry grants, and this is what the organization's doing with it. And so we would have those agreements, and there'd be this whole chain of reporting depending on what the Treasury was looking for. So if US Treasury says, hey, we need to do an audit, and they're going to be on site and they're going out and working with the businesses, we would be looking at, okay, SEDCOR, you did this program, and then they would be reaching out, okay, we awarded grants, you need to report back on how you use those funds. So again, I think the reporting mechanism and how the funds are, we haven't even gotten that far yet, because that would all be entered into a separate agreement. Because we would need to have those agreements in place to make sure that I can make the reports to US Treasury on how we're using the funds.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Commissioner Burschauer.
Thank you, Chair. So Ken, I realize that we brought up the idea of asking SEDCOR to do this. It was us that sort of precipitated this. However, I don't know that at the time we realized that there would be such a significant cost to doing so, and that they would kind of have to, invent the wheel, if you will, on that, because they don't typically do that. Is it something that our grants manager can do, has done, can certainly handle, considering the workload? And we hadn't totally written off administrative costs as in building that in as part of the budget, but is it just simply easier for us to handle it instead of having this larger sort of push and pull conversation? And then maybe utilizing SEDCOR in the sense of the committee, the economic committee, and having them come in and help make decisions and recommendations and using them in that way.
I think if I would have to take a closer, because the original, my original concerns was, again, I have one staff person that handles grants, and just the number of programs that we're rolling out is one of the reasons we were looking for those outside partners to help. I always anticipate, and maybe that's something that we probably could have talked about early in the process. I guess I'm just used to with a lot of grant functions, the administrative portions of it, you know, most of them it usually has to where you can capture at least 10% for administrative portion because they're, sorry, sneeze coming on. You know, if we were gonna, I could look at that, but I do have concerns that, admin having limited resources at this point in staffing, I think I would probably still be looking at if we're going to keep all of these grant programs in house, I'm going to need additional FTEs, and I think that's going to be something that I would probably be asking for the same amount, and then I'm going to have the same struggle as every other business that's here in kind of filling positions and doing it quickly enough to make sure we're still continuing within the timelines of the ARPA funds. So I'm not saying I can explore that, and if that's the wish of the board that we want to take the recommendation on the impacted industries and kind of separate that discussion, and I need to come up with some alternative proposals, I'm happy to do that and do that work and come back and have a conversation with the board about that specific program area.
So I'm just wondering, again, I this is just throwing this out there, is if SEDCOR could do the project impact industries grants for the current contract, $12,000 a month, and since they're not going to be perhaps doing a whole lot of the economic development work, that they have the capacity then to address that limited term project for that base rate. And that's part of our 6-month extension. Is that?
Well, that's it. Because I don't really see, and maybe this is where I'd probably look to Eric and Avishai to talk about, because I think the grant program and what we're doing with ARPA funds is in addition to, if there were no ARPA funds, we'd be having a conversation about continuing the current work under the scope of work and the current activities that they're doing right now. So where the impacted industry grants come in, it's either in addition to, or something has to come off the current scope of work to fit into that, and then making sure that we're still, like Christian was saying, keeping within the parameters and everything that was by the original RFP that was put in place.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken. Chair, may I jump in at this point? Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to all of the commissioners for your input and the things that you're looking at and considering in terms of how best do we support our communities, how best do we support our businesses, what direction should economic development be moving in Yamhill County. And I respect and appreciate that you're having these conversations, looking both at what is the impact today of the work we're doing and what should we be thinking about for the future. Commissioner Werschauer, I really appreciated your comments about our Main Street businesses. And I agree with you that they have been the most hard and longest hard hit. And I worked very closely with all of the chambers of commerce and downtown associations, first as we developed the grant programs to ensure that we were approaching it the right way, and also to ensure that our business partners were getting all of the support that they needed. SEDCOR has always seen ourselves as a hat in hand company, first name basis, familiar faces at the door, know the name of the secretary of the businesses that we are engaging with. At the same time, it takes all of those partners, the SEDCORs, the MEDPs, the downtown associations, and the chambers to cover the very broad swath of businesses that we have in our community, that we're blessed to have in our community. And that's why these partnerships are so important. So thank you for talking about that. And certainly as well, Chair Starrett, about the supply chain and how important that is. SEDCOR shifted our approach to business connectivity and our annual or I'm sorry, our monthly educational forums for industry and for our partners to an online format so that we could continue to engage the 3-county region on an ongoing basis, even though we would much prefer to be meeting in person. We made a lot of transitions to do that. So as we're talking about these two very different things, in my opinion, right, we're looking at the contract to manage the grant program for impacted industries. I wanted to first respond to say that from my perspective, I certainly don't see the work that Carrie Martin and I do as being anything near the same. The work that I do through SEDCOR is extremely different than the work that Carrie does for the county. But when it comes to the grants, right, how do we work together, and where is there, if any, duplication? The way that our contract currently reads, SEDCOR does provide the support through the EDAC to create the grant review and recommendation committee. That has always been a part of the work that we do to support grant programs through the county. We also, through that process, make recommendation to the board and to staff about what programs should look like. It is the true administration part that we're actually talking about here. And to Ken's point, that doesn't just include Carrie's time or SEDCOR's time and putting an application online. There is a great deal of marketing that goes into that, a great deal of direct business and partner communication, quite a bit of marketing. And then of course there's the cutting of the checks and the signing of the contracts and getting all of that out. And that certainly takes more than just that one staff person's time. In SEDCOR's office, we would be looking to contract with somebody part-time to help us with that administration portion. So we know that there's that added cost. And as Eric had mentioned, when we were asking others about what is that average cost as we were building our own budget, 10% was the lowest end of administrative costs. We had partners that charge up to 25%. And we felt that that was unreasonable, certainly not necessary based off of our cost, but also we did not want to impact the businesses by taking funds out of the bucket for grants that rightfully should be going to them. So we felt that that was a good place to be, especially as we were also having to staff up to get this work done. When we talk about, Commissioner Sterrett, to answer your question more specifically, or maybe this was a Ken and Chair Sterrett question, is if we were to look at something like a short-term 6-month contract that included grant work, really what my question would be is that sounds to me like a winding down of the work that SEDCOR is doing in our current role under our current contract, providing professional economic development services. So Eric and I have certainly, not to speak for Eric, but we would have to go back to our team and say, what would that look like, right? So what would, for us to facilitate that program while we're winding down activities in the county over 6 months? I take it as a compliment, and maybe it's not meant as one. I hope it is, but I take it as a compliment that the county is considering bringing economic development in-house, because when this RFP was initially published, the idea was, to my understanding, Chair, please correct me if I'm wrong, that you had two options. You could either develop an economic development partnership or an economic development department in-house, or you could partner with a regional professional service provider like SEDCOR. And at the time, from what I understand, that's a lot to think. How do you create a department? How do you staff a department? How do you train a department when you've never had one like that? How do you move forward in that way? Or, hey, let's actually kind of try this, right, with some professional folks and see how it goes. And the fact that you're now even thinking about bringing it in-house, I think is a testament to the work that SEDCOR has done, at least to some degree, to say there's value in this work. And maybe we'd like to have more local control over that, but at least we see the value of that. So again, I take that as a compliment and I thank you. And any effort that you have to establish that, I would certainly support. However, there are also some negatives to bringing it in-house. We know that when we go before businesses, they really appreciate the fact that we're an independent organization and that every phone call they have with us, every email they exchange with us is not public record, because they might be sharing with us confidential information. They might be sharing with us information they're not prepared to publish. And that's one of the reasons why organizations like SEDCOR have been established, so that they can maintain confidentiality during the recruiting process, during the expansion process, and while talking about innovation, which is all intellectual property for these folks. So all of that said, SEDCOR has always had a desire to serve our businesses first at the pleasure of the board, right? So our work is to serve the business communities, to support the jurisdictions in establishing infrastructure that appropriately supports economic development and capacity development in the county, but we do that at the pleasure of the board. So if there is a request of the board for us to consider a 6-month contract with a certain scope of work, then we could take that back and look at it. The current request by SEDCOR is to allow us to continue the contract for a year, knowing that we are going into a strategic planning session ourselves that is both focused on each individual county and regionally, which we hope and expect and anticipate with Commissioner Bershauer's participation on our board will be supported by Yamhill County, so that we include these types of things that you're talking to us about in terms of concern. And then we can come to you with a proposal for an official contract extension at the end of next year. That is what we would like to see happen, because we also know that right now is a very sensitive time to fragment or divest in economic development when our business partners are really needing some continuity and some support. And we are in the middle of some pretty significant projects. At least we hope that they turn out to be pretty significant in terms of impact. And that's our concern, right? So it's not so much the concern for SEDCOR as it is the concern for momentum and just where we're at with our economy right now and supporting our business partners. So thank you for letting me say all of that while answering your question.
Thank you very much. So,
Yeah.
Ken, go ahead.
If I may, and then the other part that, you know, and my apologies, it was probably during my presentation that I brought in the whole in-house, but I also want to put out there that there's also the other possible option, you know, like Avisha very eloquently presented it about if we're looking at something, whether it's a year or 6 months, that, you know, that may be a wind down of the current contract. It's not just, you know, as part of the discussions with the board, it's not just necessarily bringing it in-house. It may be a new RFP with a revised scope, because depending on when the RFP was drafted in 2017, it was a different economic time. It was, you know, that was well before COVID and everything else. And so, you know, the other possible option that also comes into play with that is also allowing for additional time to occur to do a new or updated RFP with a revised policy and direction to ensure that whatever direction the board decides to go, whether it's standing up an internal department, it's doing an RFP, it's doing an extension, that whatever that scope of work, it's reflective of the priorities that the board is going to set moving forward. And because I do realize when, you know, because even at times when you talk about economic development, you know, economic development could be defined by everyone here on this meeting a little bit differently. And so that's where it's really important. You know, I just wanted to highlight that as part of that, as well as part of the discussion too, is whether or not the timing, if we're looking at a future extensions or a new professional services contract, is entertaining the idea of a new RFP as well.
Commissioner Bershauer, thank you, Ken. That was good information. Thank you. Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm kind of getting the sense that maybe a compromise would be to have a 6-month extension, you know, as is. The contract scope might be as is. SEDCOR is going into strategic planning. I'm hoping that we can also go into strategic planning in January and talk about some of these, you know, some of these ideas and just potential restructuring or simply closing the gaps of kind of what we've seen over the past couple of years. And that gets us to the beginning of the fiscal year in July, right? So we're also going to be having budget discussions in May. So it sounds like that might be a good compromise. And then separate from that is a discussion about how we're going to handle the impacted industry grant. and, you know, how that's going to roll out, what the administrative part of that's going to be. I don't see that as impacting SEDCOR necessarily as immediately as the decision on the contract. So that would be something that I'm willing to kind of compromise on and get to. So at least we have some space and some time to reevaluate and have our strategic planning sessions and see if we're on the same page or if we're not going forward.
So as far as, thank you, Commissioner. So as far as the way we leave this process now, would that be direction to staff to basically work with SEDCOR on the feasibility or the desire for a 6-month extension? And then we could come back to the board and before the end of this contract, and then make a have a formal board action on that 6-month extension. Is that something that would work, Ken
Yes.
and Christian?
So what I'll do is based on, because it does sound like there's consensus to go and have the conversation with Eric and Abisha. And then the next action would be is we bring a proposed agreement back before the board for the board to consider and take action on.
Christian?
Yeah, I was just going to add, if I heard Abishak correctly, I think she said if the board were interested in a 6-month extension, that would involve also SEDCOR having some internal conversations as well. So obviously they'll need to go back, think about that, and then let us know. I think it's been pretty clearly expressed to them by what the board's now said, that that's sort of the direction that we're going. If they would be willing to do that as well, then yeah, I certainly think we can talk about an amendment to the contract that would extend it for that amount of time.
Okay, thank you. Well, if there's nothing else on this, Ken, did you want to add anything before we say thank you to Abisha and Eric? Okay, well, if there's nothing else, commissioners, well, Abisha and Eric, thank you for sitting through this discussion and for your thoughts and for your work over the last year. And we appreciate it. And we'll just work with county council and staff to come up with something that works for everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, commissioners. It's a good conversation, good information for us to have as we kind of look at our future too and how we operate. So thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are at the end of that work session. We have no department updates. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Chair, I'd move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Commissioner. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes. On to old business, item H1. This is consideration of approval to authorize Health and Human Services Director on behalf of the Yamhill County Health and Human Services to submit a proposal for grant funding to support a behavioral health resource network. As you know, this is part of the implementation of Measure 110 for housing supports for addiction, for recovery, for expansion of that, and then and that is basically it might include a request for staff increase at Health and Human Services, but that would come at a later date. So I would move approval of item I1. Further discussion?
No, Chair, but thank you for laying that out. And this is an important one to approve in my view.
Absolutely. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. On to item I2, discussion regarding strategic planning session and communications policy, and Commissioner Berschauer. This is yours.
Thank you, Chair. And this is a subset or a corollary conversation of what we just had, but I've been talking to Ken and Christian over the past couple of weeks about some of my observations just about top level county function and all of the work that we do and kind of where I've seen some gaps. The one gap that I see that is actually pretty critical in my opinion is the communications piece of it. Most organizations, whether private or public, of this size and with this kind of budget, have a communications person or PIO, or at least strategy, internal and external. We don't really have any of that. And I've seen how, and this has been just a crazy year for it, but I've seen how that's hurt us in many ways. At the beginning of this year, we were still in the county lockdowns. There was a lot of confusion, a lot of miscommunication, and we have three commissioners who are each putting out their own messages, right? And people receive mixed messages, and it's that's difficult to deal with. We also had public health sort of trying to get their message out, and public safety issues, and sometimes they conflict. And so I feel that this is a critical piece that we're missing. And to have somebody who really serves as a PIO who has the skills to do that in terms of talking to media and doing different things is really important. I also think that we do an incredible amount of good work as a county, and the information is not getting out there to most of our residents in any sort of official capacity. So my vision for this, we'll just call them a communications person or director. My vision would be that that person would report to Ken, but also have the responsibility of setting internal communications goals, namely some type of newsletter. Many other counties do this, most of them do this, but some sort of quarterly newsletter where we are featuring the work that we do, and we're communicating and educating through some type of newsletter that's physically sent to every household so that they know. And I really think this is not only beneficial, but it's a responsibility that we have, because we do partner with many nonprofits and groups in the county. We spend tax dollars on these kinds of partnerships, and we have an obligation to let the community know where the money's going and how it's helping our residents. So that's really the most urgent kind of critical piece that I see that we need. But beyond that, I think it would be worthwhile for us to sit down and have a strategic planning session sometime in January where we can hash out where I have some ideas on sort of structure where I think that we're lacking. We've talked about a deputy administrator. Ken has a lot on his plate, right? We've talked about other things. So having a session where we can sort of hammer that out and see if we're on the same page in terms of the top level administrative functions of the county. I'm certainly not one to grow the size of government, sort of goes against my principles. However, there's something to be said about perhaps reconfiguring or restructuring or finding ways to do the core functions that we need to do without really costing the county a lot of money or expanding. So those are two different items. But I do believe that the communications piece is critical, I think, and what I'm asking for is direction that we would give to Ken to open that up and start to invite folks to fill that position with the goal of having a newsletter produced and out the door in Q1 of next year of 2022. So I realize that's aggressive, but just think of the additional workload that you had last year and what we've had this year. There's a ton of information, and it's getting out in piecemeal ways. It's confusing, and I think that we're missing the opportunity to connect our residents to all of the good work that we do. And we can talk about the specifics of what that might look like later, but I really would like to see some direction on that now, and then talk about when in January might be a good time for us to all sit down and sort of go over this visioning for the county.
Thank you, Commissioner. Well, there's a lot there. There's an awful lot there. And of course, the first thing that comes to my mind is how we would pay for this, because that's always my overriding, how are we going to pay for this? And in terms of mailing something, I'm just thinking about what the planning department does when they mail a postcard and how much that costs just for the hazardous waste disposal things and how much that costs. So I would want to talk about, what we're looking at, dollars and cents and all of that. And I don't know if there are any other counties that could give us some input on what that would cost, or whether or not we do it by email or put it on the website or something. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But I think there's a lot of merit to that. I know in the past we've had your different messages going out and different people saying things to media, and it's not this one sort of cohesive message. It's all kinds of messages. So I think it would be good to have somebody that speaks for the county. I know Health and Human Services has a lot of that information that has to go out more regularly. But then I think about the emails that come from the planning, not so much the planning department, but the tax collector and the assessor's office, where they talk about, people are going to be coming and they're going to be asking to see your property, and we're going to be just making a visual assessment, and we're going to this kind of information, so we don't get that misinformation and all the emails that come where people are panicking. I think it would probably be in our citizens' best interest to know what's going on. The clerk's office, the clerk has lots of information about elections and different types of things. So yeah, I think there's a lot of value in it. And I guess the next step, Ken, would be whether or not that would be something that we put on the agenda for an early strategic planning session, including that communications policy, or whether or not we're looking for more immediacy to that communications policy.
I have some thoughts, but I wanted to give Commissioner Kula a chance to, and then I'll.
Okay, Commissioner Kula, thoughts?
Since I'm just hearing this for the first time right now, I do have lots of thoughts, but they're pretty uneducated ones. So I'll just admit to that, that each department obviously is doing very good work, and each department has the need and the ability to get that work out communicated to the public. What I'm not sure about, because again, this is just presented to me right now, is whether that communications position would be simply speaking on behalf of the Board of Commissioners and administration, or whether this is a position that would be integrating everybody in everybody in the county, all of their voices and messaging on all sorts of issues. And then if that was the vision for it, of integrating everybody's rather than merely speaking on our behalf, how the coordination would happen, and whether you're picturing the elimination of communication positions within those, or the job descriptions that exist with those communications within those departments. So those are some of the thoughts I have right now. I would be happy to work through kind of a strategic planning session in the new year, though. I do share Commissioner Sterrett's position about mailing a document, because I know how expensive it is. But I also want to recognize that we do have media sources that are printed that go to people. There's the graphic, the register, the bulletin, and there are other ones as well, including the cities also send messages out to the public. And Commissioner Sterrett and I have had many conversations about the value of paying versus sharing in those publications. So I'm happy to revisit those conversations as well about what's the most effective way. I do know that digital media communications are fraught with gaps, because as we know, there are people that just don't participate and aren't even it's not accessible to them. So if there's going to be a comprehensive communication strategy, that would be one thing, but simply mailing something I think is lacking in it. And I think about how transit has spent so much time really communicating with both its riders and agencies and the general public. And that's costing a lot of money. And so I just want to make sure that we're thinking about all those things, that there's multiple agencies involved that already have their communications teams, and that we're thinking about comprehensive communication strategy. So with that, I'm happy to continue the conversation into the new year about strategic planning.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Berschauer.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Commissioner Kula. I appreciate that. That is really, I didn't want to get too deep into it, but that is my vision of having some consolidation of those efforts so that at least on a quarterly basis, those messages are getting out there, whether it's from the transit department or from the clerk or from the assessor. And it would be the responsibility of that particular communications director to coordinate all of that and to communicate with each department and to make sure there's economy of scale when you're talking about mailing notices or mailing copies of the budget like we do, right? We have a lot of different pieces of communication that we send out. I'm talking about something that sort of brings it all together into really a county-wide message going out, so it's consistent. And it would feature, you know, each department, HHS message for this quarter, you know, so-and-so's message for this quarter. So that's really, I think that would help solve some of the concern about cost. I also think that in order for it to function in a way that doesn't necessarily or unnecessarily burden a particular, you know, whether it's administrative budget or whatever, that potentially the cost of this person could be shared across the entire county. So, you know, if you're going to have a regular communication or piece in the communication, you know, part of your budget does go towards this person, similar to how we fund other positions. So those are just my thoughts. You know, obviously, I think that the goal of having something go out in the Q1 of 2022 is aggressive and, you know, may not actually work, but I think it's critical enough that we need to proceed in moving that conversation forward about this particular person and trying to find somebody. It's taking a lot longer to find people. So, you know, I would prefer that process starts sooner.
And if I may, I'd like to, if I can, commissioners, I'd like to kind of jump in on the conversation. And I think, you know, without getting, you know, because I think that some of the struggles that we have sometimes is trying not to get too far down into the weeds. And, you know, and I'm hearing the feedback on, you know, that, you know, what I'm kind of hearing is we need to improve a communication strategy and basically administrator figure out a way on how we're going to staff this and make those improvements. And then I will go and sharpen my pencil and start doing the research and analysis and seeing what the position or coming up with a plan that then I would come back and talk to the board on how we're going to implement it to make sure that we're addressing either that operational need or that policy direction that the board wants to go. The one part that, you know, that I would like to take like one step back and just kind of advocate that if we did a strategic meeting or a goal setting or something along those functions, that we would have some kind of a facilitated discussion about, you know, whether that's for the year or if it, you know, depending on the time frame. Because I also, you know, at times I think some of the struggles when we're looking at what we, you know, budget for, build positions for, stand up programs for, sometimes it can be a challenge because I'll look at it and, you know, it's much easier for me that if we have a strategic framework that the board has agreed on and charts me on a path that gives us clear instructions when we're building budgets for the next fiscal year or immediate needs that we need to address, that I'm making sure that I'm concentrating on making sure that I'm addressing those priorities that the board has set. Because I would highlight, you know, just based on the discussions that we had throughout this formal session, and I'll try not to make it even longer, that there's a lot of funding demands, there's a lot of personnel demands, there's a lot of priorities that even I could share where we have some deficiencies that that I'm also hoping to continue to address, whether that's in human resources or if it's around procurement or if it's around some of these other items that I do see that there are some deficiencies in some areas that we need to address. It's just before I unleash, you know, my staff, or if I start, I want to make sure I'm not going down a path that there's not support from the board that it's addressing a concern area that the board has. And so, you know, kind of taking a step back and if there's, you know, interest and if the board would like to schedule something for January that is a strategic goal setting session, I would highly recommend that that would be take form of a work session. And I would also recommend bringing in an outside facilitator, and I could do some research and come back with some recommendations on that to help facilitate that discussion, because I know it can get very challenging and difficult when we're talking about trying to find, again, common areas of focus or concern or goals that the board would like to see us improve or take action on. So it's just something that if there's consensus to proceed, I could start doing that work. We could start looking at some possible calendar dates, and I could come back with some recommendations for making that happen. And then as far as the communications and getting into the position is, you know, if there's agreement to proceed, that's one of the priority areas, then I can do all the work and then whether that's built into the budget or we do something mid-year to address that. Now that I start doing the recruitment process, I could start doing that. It essentially gives me the green light to proceed and look at how to implement that priority that the board would like to see implemented. So.
Commissioner Berschauer, is this something that you see being able to put into a strategic planning session in January in terms of the discussion of this as being one of the areas of priority? Just trying to make sure that we're realistic about what staff is able to do in terms of either moving this forward or implementing this, because it seems like it would be part of a bigger discussion. But this is your agenda item, so I'm just going to pretty much defer to what your suggestion would be at this time.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that, I mean, we're now coming up on less than a month until the end of the year. So this is certainly part of my proposal for a strategic planning session, is this particular position. I do think it's more critical than waiting, just because by the time we get everything rolling, you know, you're probably talking towards the end of Q1 just to get the position open and out. However, if there's agreement on maybe a compromise where, you know, I can work with Ken on some of the structure of what that position might look like, or what I would love to see. I can certainly do that over the next month and then bring it to that particular meeting and we can discuss it there. Maybe that'll move us a little bit quicker along. But I do think it's a critical position. You know, I realize that we have constraints, but if Ken is amenable to that, I can certainly help, you know, help with that process over the next month.
Okay, let Ken respond to that, Commissioner Kula, and then we'll go to you. Ken, is that something in terms
Chair,
of?
I would say that I'd like to express my position first before we ask Ken whether staff is ready for this. And that's just that I don't think that outside of having like a structured conversation about what we see as the needs for our administration and how the administration, so finance, admin, HR, and the Board of Commissioners works with and listens to the needs of agencies, departments within the county. I think that this is premature. And this is the first time I'm hearing of it. And I really think that we need to hear from departments about their needs before we go and build a position and look for money that's going to come from them.
Thank you, Commissioner. Ken?
Well, and that was the thoughts, because any type of funding mechanism and how this is set up, you know, that's going to be part of an analysis that I'll need to do. And one of the things that I would highlight that this type of it's not unusual for a lot of organizations that usually in the first week or two of the, you know, each new calendar year, and especially leading up to your budget process, to go into some goal setting, set some priorities, some program areas, because then that helps give me as the budget officer and as the county administrator to look at program areas on how I'm going to address what those priorities are that the board has for the next 12 months and how we're going to build that into the budget, what the revenue sources are going to be, for an example, for a new position, that if you have, in this case, a communication type position, you know, how that relates with the departments, how it interacts with the other elected department heads. You know, how does it complement? What are the mechanisms in kind of rolling a program out? What are the costs associated with implementing a communication strategy? The nice part is if the board were to do a strategic goal setting for the year, that really complements the whole budget process and helps us departments. And, you know, when I'm interacting with departments and we're building budgets, that it's, well, here's a priority that, you know, the board would like to see that come May, when the budget committee and the board are reviewing the budget all the way through June to budget adoption, that we're ensuring that we're adopting and using our resources in a manner that's consistent with the goals and priorities that the board has set for that year. And so that's why I would, you know, I can continue to look at, you know, while we're doing the, you know, because if there's agreement, I can continue to do the research and talk about ways to improve communications coming from the county and have those conversations with the department heads. That can still continue, but I think I would just advocate for, if there's interest in doing this, that we would pick, you know, like one of the first formals in January. And then if I can find a facilitator that quickly that can help start doing the prep work even earlier, when we schedule that work session in the first or second week in January, you know, the board could have that discussion. We could also make sure that if there's questions that come out of that, that we need to have other department heads or some of the other elected department heads join the discussion as well. Because if you have questions or want input on some, you know, their thoughts on this, we could also have time to put that together as well. So then that way we're having, you know, at least we're charting a path, and then we can just start building on the specifics as we start going down the path.
Thank you. So Commissioner Bershauer, if you would be willing to share more specifics of what you have in mind with Ken, and so that we have something substantial other than a concept, so that we have, say, something in front of us where we could say, this is what we're looking at, this is what the position would entail, and this is what we're hoping will come of it. And then I think that the board would have a little bit more to go on. And I also think it is important for us to be able to get the word out about all of the services that the county does, all the collaborations, all the partnerships. People tell us all the time, I had no idea. And that's kind of that's hard information to get out. So I think it's a great idea, and I appreciate that. And I hope that we can get some more specifics to Ken. Commissioner Kula.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to make sure that when we're that when an idea is fleshed out, say if Commissioner Bershauer gets something more concrete, that this doesn't supplant the communications of each department and agency. I think that's a really important component, is that they all have their own timeframes. You know, we're having to go through somebody who reports directly to Ken when an agency needs to make a communication out into the world is not a model that I would appreciate, and it's a model that I hope counties would recognize, as we see the state doing sometimes, where no, this is what we do, that we do this communication. So I just really want to make sure that whatever kind of position is proposed, that it's one that doesn't take over for agencies in the county.
And I guess, you know, I would just in response, because I do, because from what I'm hearing is the commissioners are expressing, you know, that we can make some improvements on coordinating our communications. I don't think it's necessarily intended to replace or the communications that are happening at the department level, because you're right, there's a lot of communications that the departments, it's really streamlining that and how we can better support those departments, possibly with a coordinated, especially with larger topics, that, and how we can improve that coordination. It's much like, there's a lot of other centralized services that we provide here in admin that, again, there's a lot of HR, services generally that are provided at the department level, but everything still flows through a central HR team. And then that central HR team's also available to say, you've got these resources available to you. I have these connections. I can help you with your press release. It can support, and especially for those other departments that don't have a dedicated communications person, to provide that assistance. So it provides that centralized approach. So I think there is some ways that we can approach that. I just want to also make sure that because I also have my own thoughts in some other areas of priority that for some staffing needs, to be able to have that discussion on, which is the communications or additional HR or procurement or county counsel's office or some of those things, because it's all related, and trying to prioritize that on what the board wants to implement as a policy moving forward. And then I'll do my part and implement it.
Thank you, Ken. Commissioner Bershauer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ken. It's Commissioner Gould. I'm not meaning to supplant their own internal communications, but as Ken said, many of our departments don't have any functioning, marketing or communications efforts going on. So this would certainly help streamline some of those messages. It would create economies of scale if we are spreading the cost of this position over every department. So maybe they would choose to consolidate some of that. But I do think it's important that we move forward and have some sort of comprehensive external and internal communication strategy with somebody who does that work, who is streamlining all of that and serves as a PIO. And I would like to come to that January strategy session prepared with something that is, a pretty solid outline of what that would look like. So I can do that work with Ken over the next month. Whether that involves direct communications with department heads over the next month is kind of up to Ken, but at least what I would like to see in that proposal, Chair Starrett, you and I have media backgrounds. We know how important this kind of work is, and we know, what the parameters of the work are. So I can certainly do the work over the next month and make sure that I come prepared to that meeting to discuss this, but I do believe it's a priority. And just to get to Ken's point about the scheduling, the first couple weeks in January are great. I know you mentioned, I believe it was COG or some other organization that could help facilitate. And I think that would be wonderful too. So.
Thank you.
And in anticipation for this, I did reach out to COG, and I'm having conversations about what services they provide, or or access to services, that what they might have. I think at least Casey or Commissioner Kula and Commissioner Starrett remember, when COG helped facilitate, Christian and my evaluations in prior years, looking at, some of our partners and seeing what they may have available to help kind of come in, because that's their forte. And it's nice to have impartial, new facilitator help to guide the discussions and kind of formulate those goals and those strategies for the year.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Bershauer, thank you for bringing that to us, and I look forward to that. It seems kind of an exciting possibility if we can figure out a way to get more information about what we do out to folks. So thank you for that. And we can move on to item I3. And looking at the time, I'm going to keep it brief, but I've contacted, I requested an extension of the comment period on one of the OAR rules regarding public comment was really limited. I've got the information in the agenda packet. And I also reached out to Pat Allen at OHA and had some concerns about the fact that the process for the digital vaccine project seemed to be, again, lack transparency and lacked the ability for people to make a public comment. So I just want to call out that we need to really be in touch with OHA, and when there are issues and changes in OARs or different things that impact the county, that we should be able to be included in the conversation and at least be given some of the information so that Health and Human Services and that the commissioners and everybody get a little bit of information on what's going on. So that's in there. And as
Chair,
far
I will
as,
say that I also heard a lot of concerns about that. So I echo that. I think was something that this known to be this contentious or potentially contentious, that there's a larger window for comment.
right. Thank you very much. So any other, let's see, that would be the end. Public hearings, we have none. Item K, do we have announcements? Commissioners?
Chair, I'll just say that I have enough time to eat some food before Mid-Willamette Area Committee on Transportation. And as you probably know, there's some concern at the act that they're not being heard by the Oregon Transportation Commission. So this is an ongoing thing, and I'll provide you updates as we go. But basically the call from acts across the state is to actually have a measurable advisory capacity at OTC. So stay tuned.
Thank you for that. Thanks for being part of that. Commissioner Bershauer?
No announcements at this time. Thank you.
Okay, I just have one small announcement that this morning I filed for re-election across the street, across the parking lot at the clerk's office. So that will make some people very happy and make some other people really very unhappy. So going forward, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, enjoy Ashland, Christian, and everybody have a wonderful rest of the week, and we'll see you next Thursday. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.